Welcome to Fandom Power.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Fandom Power. This time, as promised, way back when we did our both our Fandalorian review series and our Order 66, we agreed to commit to reviewing The Bad Batch. So sit back and relax for the next, 15 sessions as we get through the 16 episodes of The Bad Batch in Fandom Power presents The Fan Batch. All right, so this is kind of cool because just like Season 2 of The Mandalorian, where they debuted it sort of midweek, The Bad Batch debuted on May the 4th. So
Star Wars Day.
On Star Wars Day, yeah. And my first thought was, are they going to pull a Mandalorian and drop 2 episodes this week? Because the 4th of May was a Tuesday, and sure enough, they did. So it kind of caught me off guard because it was a busy week for me where I had a lot of stuff going on. I'm like, oh, I guess I got to fit another one in.
Crazy.
All right.
You guys just before we get rocking on that, did you guys happen to catch either the biomes or the starship fly-throughs?
Andy and I were just talking about that as we drove down this morning, and we were like, yes, we did.
The biomes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Especially the Hoth one.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Superb. I didn't know I needed that.
No, I liked it quite a bit. I love the Hoth one. For me reminded me of sort of like the Battle of Hoth, but from the Empire side as they were advancing on Echo Base.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Although the snow speeders seemed a little bit out of place. No, I very much enjoyed that. And like Andy said with the fly-throughs, like did you feel kind of ripped off when the Millennium Falcon, like, hey man, you need to show me more?
Yeah, I sort of thought we spent too much time outside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even get to see the
that
bathroom.
looked like that one in particular looked like a sort of a Galaxy's Edge commercial.
Yeah, I'll give you that, yeah.
And then, just as a fan, I would have preferred an Imperial or a Victory class Star Destroyer to a First Order Star Destroyer.
I agree with you.
But both were fairly impressive. I mean, I couldn't tell the difference whether that was real or CG or sets or models or whatever. So that was perfect.
And then, of course, them wanting to capture all eras of Star Wars too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they are just those 2 little things are fan service. You might revisit them, but probably not. But they threw them out for the birthday, if you want, or whatever you want to call it. So
right.
That was kind of cool of them. They don't have to do that stuff.
No, and I mean, you got to wonder, is that like a passion project where somebody, at Lucasfilm is saying, listen, I've got this thing I'm doing in my spare time, and if it works out, can we do something with it? And, so the appropriate boss goes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's certainly quite possible. It could be like test footage for new game mechanics. It could be, and they just have this stuff laying around. Certainly the Hoth stuff looked like an elevated version of the Battlefront 2 game, but way cleaner, like, closer to live action.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, what do you think? You want to take a dive into one of these episodes?
Let's hit the aftermath.
All right. Episode 1, it's called Aftermath. It debuted Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, depending on when you're listening to this. I don't know how far away you are from that. This one is co-written by Jennifer Corbett and Dave Filoni. So Jennifer Corbett, she's been tasked as the series lead writer. Her previous writing credits include 3 episodes of Star Wars Resistance. She was the co-executive producer of NCIS, and she wrote 17 episodes of that show. So interesting to see, someone who's got a background in writing legal drama, how that translates over to Star Wars.
Well, they're going to run into some legal troubles along the way.
You'd think, right, with the change of government. The law is, in fact, changing.
As a writer, and everybody wants to write this, other than that, and you just sort of end up writing what they tell you. So this is, you know what I mean? So all writers want to stretch into something, and all writers are, some are better at certain things than others, certainly, but I think all writers want to capture energy and comedy and action and drama all at the same time, but tend to get pigeonholed into so it's nice to see someone stretching. And I also don't think Dave Filoni, if he's going to hand the gears over and just put a name on it and then oversee it.
Yep.
I gotta. So far, so good. So that he gets a lot of passes from me to start, and that's why I'm also okay with the pace of the show to start too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that when we get into some of the plot beats about pacing, because I think that really plays heavily into sort of where I sit with it, sort of as a fan emotionally and like in terms of my interest level. So this one is directed by Stuart Lee, and if you're not familiar with Stuart Lee, 23 episodes of the Clone Wars, 15 episodes of Star Wars Rebels, and 19 episodes of Star Wars Resistance. However, he did have some help, and this is where I start to go, because you've got two other directors on this one. You've got Saul Ruiz, who we've heard his name before. 4 episodes of the Clone Wars, some of our favorites actually in that last season. 12 episodes of Rebels and 6 episodes of Resistance. And then our other director that we all spoke highly about was Nathaniel Villanova, with 4 episodes of Clone Wars, all in the last season. It concerns me when you throw that many directors into a single episode. I appreciate the collaborative process. I mean, certainly we're doing that as we speak.
It is a long episode, though.
It is a long episode, but at the same time, I mean, maybe it's just me and I'm just being, kind of cautious about it. I mean, you have these, director teams like the Wachowskis, and you have the Russos, who are, great directors as a team. I just don't know if the 3 of these, because all 3 of these directors individually have like turned out some great Star Wars content. But at the end of the episode, when I sat back and I looked at what we had, I was like, was there a conflict of ideas here? Like, was there something going on where things weren't necessarily jiving maybe the way I wanted them to? But who knows? I'll be curious to know if in future episodes, if we have big collaborative directorial efforts.
And I think it's a lot to do with a very similar team structure to what we had going on with The Mandalorian. Like everybody sat around and wrote the episodes. Everybody sat around and planned out the beats. Everybody sat, so I think there are a lot of people wearing a lot of different hats, and I think it is a very collaborative process again. And I was saying some negative things earlier, like not negative, but trepidatious things about it being too derivative of Mandalorian style and plot and stuff. And I'm almost all turned around on that after having watched.
Oh, that's interesting. That'll make for some good conversation, because on my rewatch last night, I decided that I'm still where I was on my initial thoughts. Yeah.
Wicked.
All right, I'm going to give you a large synopsis, which is basically going to lay out the beats for the whole episode. This one comes courtesy of the general Wikipedia page, not the Star Wars Wikipedia. The Wikipedia, which was a very concise but yet informative synopsis. So, while the Bad Batch are assisting Jedi Master Depa Billaba and her Padawan Caleb Doom, Order 66 is issued and Billaba is killed. The Bad Batch receive the order too, but only Crosshair feels compelled to obey it, and Hunter lets Doom escape. Returning to Kamino, the Bad Batch learn that an Empire has replaced the Republic and meet Omega, a young female defective clone. Soon after, Admiral Tarkin arrives to evaluate the clone's viability and sends the Bad Batch to eliminate a group of insurgents on Onderon. When they discover that these insurgents are actually fugitives under Saw Gerrera who refuse to submit to the new Empire, the Bad Batch abandon their mission and return for Omega, but are arrested for treason. Tarkin has Crosshair's inhibitor chip programming enhanced, turning him against his squad mates and forcing the Bad Batch and Omega to flee without him. And that is the episode in a nutshell. So, let's talk about that opening sequence, because I think that opening sequence is probably, for me, it's the high water mark of the whole episode.
Well, it does introduce them with a bang.
Absolutely. It's meant to be. That's how we know where we are, that we're still in the same spot, that we're still invested in these characters. And in a way, regardless of their personalities and if we like them personally or not, the Bad Batch are representative of all the good and Rex too, but we'll get there. But representative of all the good things that those clones were. Yeah. Because now those clones are stormtroopers. And that was one of the hardest things to watch for me, honestly, like emotionally, was watching the clones like herd people, push people around, like be stormtroopers, act like stormtroopers. And you'll notice that very rarely do they take their helmets off anymore.
No, they don't.
I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, there's a few things that I kind of picked up on, sort of this, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this transitory, Grand Army of the Republic to the New Order, particularly around Tarkin and his assessment of the clones. And, later on in the episode, he makes a very poignant statement to Prime Minister Lamassu about testing the viability of the clones. And he mentions the economics of the whole thing, and Lamassu protests how, the programming of the clones is far superior to any conscript. But, for those of us who are steeped in legends, and I even I made a note here, I'm like, Tarkin's interaction with Prime Minister Lamassu, are we actually seeing the foundations for the Tarkin doctrine? The Tarkin doctrine. Yes. So the basics of the Tarkin doctrine essentially boil down to overwhelming shows of military force as opposed to actual military might. So you just overwhelm people with numbers, and that continual show of force creates an element of fear, and so that rule by fear, which was collectively known as the Tarkin doctrine.
Yeah. It raises so many questions.
But it also answers a couple too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you go with the fact that they're phasing out clones and they're just going to take, Joe Blow off the street to sign up and be part of the Empire, that's going to factor into where you see in Solo, where they're like, sign up today.
That's right.
And that's going to get you.
He does say conscription, which is very different than, hey, sign up today.
Yeah, that's like you're getting drafted.
Certain places are sign up now.
I think, with, and this is just me going off into pure speculation territory, but that's part of the fun of the show and how we like to interconnect all of the properties. So as Andy was just saying with Solo, I mean, when you look at Corellia and Corellia's place within the larger galactic empire, that they were a major shipbuilding planet. So, was Corellia afforded maybe some, pleasantries or niceties that, other planets in the empire were not. And so
you provide us with ships, we'll give you a bit of leeway.
Right. So, I mean, how else could, criminal elements like, oh my God, what's her name? the underground lady that was basically had all the kids.
Yes. Forgive me.
The weird worm lady.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, how is the criminal elements like that allowed to operate so brazenly open, if there wasn't some kind of arrangement already in place? Or
certainly there's money to be made off that corruption.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here's another fun point for you. The clones, through the Clone Wars and everything, they're excellent shots.
That's true.
Once you phase them out and get Joe Blow off the street, you can see why in A New Hope they miss every shot.
Exactly. Conscripts who are typically,
not soldiers.
We can use our own history and look at the Russians during the Russian conscripts of the Second World War were just not well trained. Literally, what's the sniper movie with the Russian sniper movie where you see them lining up and it's like one man takes the rifle, the other man takes the bullets. Right. When the first man falls, the second man picks up the rifle. It's just like, holy crap. But again, like we were talking about, that's an active wartime. And I mean, from the Empire's perspective, I would presume that, Palpatine's up on high thinking that he's achieved his galactic peace. But like as Tarkin and Lamassu allude to in their conversation, is they're going to need troops to maintain order.
Yeah, you need that security force.
Yeah.
If you're going to create a police state, you need the police to man it.
That's right. As you may or may not know, as an action figure collector, I'm a huge fan of all the named clones. Mm-hmm. I think they're cool. So we get introduced to a new one in this episode. It's Clone Captain Gray, who is Deppa's, I guess, her clone commander, her Rex, I guess.
And I could not figure out the unit based on his paint job.
No, I didn't either.
At all.
Nope.
At all.
Yeah. I noticed that this episode made a point of like, and I don't know if it was just like a saving money thing, but there was a lot of like plain Jane Phase 3 troopers. I mean, we see the Coruscant Guard on Camino, which is another point I want to talk about.
Yeah.
But largely, other than Gray, they're all just plain Phase 3. There's no individuality. There's nothing there.
No, and I think that's 100% on purpose because nothing looks closer to a stormtrooper than a Phase 3
pure white,
plain and also in the and I know I'm jumping ahead again, but also in that cafeteria, the food fight scene, if you will, they all have that bog standard marine cut square.
No, they do.
None of them are blonde or facial tattoos. Like those clones are fresh, right? Like, and now that the inhibitor chip is gone, all the free will is gone. These are stormtroopers now.
Well, I find it interesting that, there was still such a sizable amount clone force on Kamino, which is very suggestive that the cloners were producing clones up to and including the final days of the war.
And certainly there's still infants in chambers there. This
An
ongoing thing.
That's
like,
right.
Lama Su says we had a contract.
Yeah.
And to keep producing clones, like the end of the war isn't good money for her.
No, it's not.
Or him. Sorry, Lama Su's. Him.
So the planet is Keller, so I've actually written it down as the Battle of Keller. Do we know anything about Keller? I don't think we've heard this.
So this scene is very different from the Kanan Jarrus comic book.
Okay.
Which was the only previous version, I guess, of what was his canon version of Order 66.
Okay.
And it differs a little bit in that the war was over. So I think, and we're going back to like 2015, 16.
Okay.
Around the time between Last Jedi and Force Awakens when this comic came out.
Yeah.
So a lot of the ideas that, even solidified in the final season of Clone Wars and in the rest of the sequel movies hadn't even been conceived of yet. And so the timeline's a little skewed. Order 66 hasn't occurred yet, but the war is over. Dippa's squad has won the day. And her and Caleb and Gray and another clone that's named Styles are all sitting around a campfire.
Right.
When Gray goes up to ostensibly take a piss, and he gets the Order 66. And Dippa manages to just, Styles and Gray attack, and she deflects a few blaster bolts. And ostensibly the same scene, run Caleb, and he reluctantly does, gets away. But it's very different in terms of the timeline.
Well, I mean, presumably
it's at night. The war has already ended,
and the Bad Batch are not droids,
there. But so I think the timeline has been corrected, though.
Okay.
Because we know, like, that when Palpatine gives the order, like, we see the other side of like how Season 7 went from Clone Wars through Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
And then now this one is coming through Revenge of the Sith into what's next.
Yes.
And so they're both like they it's like a DNA chain. They're spiraling through one another. And I think I'm really excited at the politics of this. This is a story, regardless of the characters that are telling the story, this is a part of the lore that I really wanted to know.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. You and I both agreed, the joke about who wants to watch a 2-hour movie about what happens in the Senate chamber, and we were both like, over here.
Yeah, so I'm super, when the Tarkin and the Prime Minister are talking, that stuff is keeps me wrapped. I really like that stuff.
I do. I like that as well.
This version of Caleb's escape it's super close. It actually gives him a little more reason to be why he's like he is when we meet him in Rebels.
Well, that was something that I had picked up on too, and I thought back to that first episode of Rebels where clones are introduced, and Kanan Jarrus is like, he's not afraid of them, but he's like, his cautionary. Do you know how dangerous they are? Like, he's really concerned about, like, do you know what they did? He's not like out to get them, but he is like super cautious.
Right, exactly.
And for good reason.
That scene was really good too. The way he, Hunter's still protecting him.
Yeah.
We see, Crosshair repeat the good soldiers follow orders thing.
How many times did he do that throughout the show?
Yeah, twice, at least twice.
Twice, maybe 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's a struggle with him it continues to wear at him, like to eat at him. Like he just can't. And I mean, there was the joke in the, I don't know if it's this episode or the next one, where Tech makes a joke to Wrecker about, oh, that's your programming coming through. And he's like, don't make jokes about that. But really, that is the programming coming through.
Absolutely. And it's like, and Lauren and I talked about this, it's like, not only does the inhibitor chip make them turn on the Jedi, but it's like a reset, right? It's like you still have all your training and memories and stuff, but you're just day one clone reset to all your programming. Like your basic programming is now you're back to, soldier form. Like if you evolved,
you're compliant.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It's like
one thing though,
like a factory reset.
Yeah, a factory reset. Exactly. One thing I found interesting in the scene where Palpatine was like probably way ahead of myself.
His big hollow projection.
Given the big speech.
Yeah.
We're tracking through.
Plucked
Revenge
directly from Revenge of the Sith.
There was a significant number of clones not cheering. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
I did not.
There was a lot of clones cheering.
And a lot just staying there.
There was a smaller percentage of clones just kind of looking around and going, well, maybe.
Yeah.
What the hell?
We see that Order 66 is delivered by radio. So you have to wonder, like, did only the commanders get it and then they disseminated it down to the troops, or did every rank and file troop get it directly on their comm?
It makes sense.
Because even Tech was talking about this encoded comm channel, or this encoded comm traffic.
The comm channel is repeating one directive. Execute Order 66.
Right, and they all get it. And,
that's what I mean. Like,
even Wrecker is like, I heard it, but I just ignored it. Because what is that? I don't know what that is.
What's Order 66?
So there's a couple things that come up in this episode that I actually, and I wrote it as plot armor, where this is where, and I hate to get right into it like this early in the show, but this is where some of my disappointment comes in because of that plot armor. There was such legacy and there was a lot of rules established in that final arc of the Clone Wars. I was about to say Order 66. No, that's our show. But in our show, we dove in really hard, and I mean, we analyzed that stuff. And I mean, Order 66, you have this point where between Rex and Jesse in their squaring off, and they make a point to be very on the nose about Order 66 was to terminate the Jedi as enemies of the state and any clone who disobeyed.
That's right.
So why wasn't the Bad Batch summarily executed when they went back to Kamino? Because Crosshair filed a report that said that they disobeyed.
A means to an end, I think.
This is where I write plot armor, right? Like, we can't have our main characters, getting offed in the first episode, but it's just like, could you not have come up with a more convincing way to have them get out of it? I mean, if and I want to talk about inhibitor chips just a little bit more to maybe sort of justify that, because Tech makes a thing about, well, maybe it's our defectiveness makes us immune to that. Does that mean Crosshair is actually the most pure, genetically speaking?
Probably.
I have a theory about Crosshair too, especially because of what he's wearing at the end of the episode, but I think he might even be a clone template for the Death Troopers.
For Death Troopers, that's an interesting
they're
thought.
They're all like really tall and lean.
They are, yeah,
and
tall and lean
that armor
guys.
Looks very similar to the armor they wear, with green eyes.
Yeah, I made a note on that too about it's the proto stormtrooper armor,
right? Because maybe instead of moving forward through cloning the average clone and just filling your army with that at a very clearly expensive. It's and we're reminded again that this is like a world that's about money, which, for what it's worth, The Last Jedi tried to hammer home, and is explored in The Mandalorian as well. That there's a price to war.
Right.
Maybe that's I lost myself.
That's okay.
Maybe that's what we're getting at, though.
Maybe. You mentioned talking about DNA a little bit earlier, and I just want to talk about the DNA of the show itself. And this is interesting. The opening, the title cards open, and it's ostensibly another episode of the Clone Wars, right down to Newsflash.
Yes.
The Battle of Color. Yeah, exactly.
It's still red from the last
season of Clone Wars. And then, of course,
they want you to be able to watch this back to back.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was kind of neat, sort of talking about the DNA, the lineage of the show, just letting us know as viewers, like, this is where it comes from.
Direct connection.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
This is the reason that Caleb Doom is super important at the beginning of this, because we're
yeah.
This is a huge story that's going on in the background, and it's all so linked together. It's starting with the Clone Wars and moving up through Rebels, and we talked about how that was like the spiritual successor, and now we have something that's going to be forged into the middle of those things, and we get to see the evolution of characters we never thought we'd get to see. That's really.
Is the appearance of Caleb Doom in this just a fan service moment to let us know that there is that connection, or are we going to see him again?
I think he's done.
I agree with that.
You've got your connection to him, and now move on in the Bad Batch direction.
Honestly, it's the prologue, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's to remind us exactly where we are and how closely tied we are to the things that we're invested in already.
Yeah.
This story, we're going to meet Rex. We're probably going to meet Ahsoka. Dave Filoni doesn't F around.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're, in a background scene somewhere, just passing through, as Cut said to Hunter when they'd mentioned about Rex told us, and he's like, "What? You saw Rex? Hey, passed through here yesterday." Like, oh,
I missed him by a day.
It's like,
that's awesome. And
it's like the Pokeroo.
Kind
I missed him again.
Yeah, exactly.
Pokeroo was here and I missed him again?
Those two might be the same guy.
Yeah, really. So the Battle of Kalar is essentially won. The Clone War is over, and Hunter tries to help poor little Caleb Doom, who's now on the run for the next 10 years or so.
And he tunes Crosshair.
Oh, big time.
Showing that like a Padawan against even an accelerated, like genetically modified aberrant clone with special abilities is still
right.
Like a serious opponent.
That's right. So that brings us back to going back to Kamino, and they talk about, we're going home. I found that interesting that, this kind of raised the question for me because it's not really answered in the Clone Wars either. It's like, are we supposed to believe that when they're not conducting operations that Clone Force 99 actually lives on Kamino? That they're not garrisoned somewhere in the galaxy?
Like on Coruscant or
somewhere?
Well, the Jedi don't even know about them.
Right.
So they seem to have some sort of link more to the
Kaminoans. Yeah.
Kaminoans than to the actual, they still serve the R. They do the dirty work and stuff, but there's an, they live there. There's an inexorable link that's sort of deeper. Or maybe when part of the aspect we haven't seen, maybe everybody's garrisoned there and they just rotate in and out.
That's entirely possible.
To heal, and maybe they just rotate in and out. We just didn't get that level of detail, perhaps.
There is this element of clones as property, and it comes up in this episode, but it's also come up in the Clone Wars about damaging our clones or damaging my clones. Like, they're not people; right. They're property. So, on that level, sure, it makes sense. Send them. Take your car to the garage. You got to send your clone back for a checkup. You know what I mean? Make sure he's still doing.
And even we see that when there's defectiveness in the late seasons with Echo and with Fives, and they bring them back to Kamino first before they go to Coruscant, before they go before the Jedi or the Republic scientists. Yeah. They go right back to Kamino as like, send your PlayStation back to Sony. Don't send it to.
Don't take it back to where you bought it. Yeah.
Right.
So now we get back to Kamino, and things are clearly different. You see, good to see that there was a mix of Kamino clones, the white and gray guys. So they were, essentially the garrison force for Kamino. Right. But then you have the Coruscant Guard. And immediately, as the viewer, I'm asking the same question. What is the Coruscant Guard doing there? We see that Jedi carried by on a stretcher, dropping their lightsaber from underneath the sheet. And I wonder, what was that? Was that Jedi just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was he or she there to pick up a new batch of clones when the order went down? Or was he there with Tarkin? Like, there's a side story there somewhere.
There's a side story. I looked for a little bit about the lightsaber, but couldn't really find.
Yeah, visually, it wasn't recognizable to me, oh, I know who that belongs to.
Although when I paused it and zoomed in on it, it's clearly a female, and the hand is purplish.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Who knows?
We lost a lot of people that day.
True. But are they just maybe, bring this one in for more genetic material that we can work with?
Well, that's another question that's going to come up in this episode, too, because I know Hank and I, before you'd watched the episode, and we all sort of talked about it, but should we jump right to Omega right now, then?
Well, you'll meet her in a
We're going
minute.
to in a few minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more about the Coruscant Guard. If you don't remember, the Coruscant Guard were the force that were led by Clone Commander Fox.
Bastard.
That treasonous bastard.
Ah, you miserable bastard!
He's still on my bad guy shelf.
Isn't he?
Not even on my Clone Wars shelf. He's on my bad guy shelf.
Oh, I stuck him with all the other named clones. He might be on the end, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and there's my note about plot armor. Why weren't they summarily executed? Okay, so Crosshair files that report stating as much, and the precedence for execution was established by Rex and Jesse in the final episodes of the Clone Wars.
I think they're cutting them a break.
Yeah, maybe.
Because
maybe
Hunter, he says, he's dead. And he's like,
right.
Well, where is he?
Where's the body?
He's like, down there. He's like, well, why aren't you looking down?
Yeah, when people fall, usually you look down, not across.
And he's like, I don't want to look down.
Yeah,
not all of us do.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't need to see it.
So technically he says he completed Order 66, but Crosshairs doesn't believe him, so maybe they're giving him the benefit of a doubt.
But
because of that.
Even the banter between them where it's like, we don't even know what the order is. And Crosshair, like, as soon as you said that, like, okay, you just hit the criteria for execution.
Yeah.
You just challenge that order. And that's, like you said, Hank, he struggles with that, good soldiers follow orders.
Right. So he's having, think of his crisis of faith as being, 100 times lighter than Rex's.
Let's just put this in context for a second here. If any of them were going to flip, could it be anybody other than Crosshair?
No.
He's the coldest, most calculating of all of them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
If anybody was going to be the villain moving forward, and I had said that 5 minutes into the episode to Lauren, I was like, I could see this. I didn't even think it was going to happen this early in the thing, but I could see him separating from the group and becoming an actual viable villain, versus the team. So I absolutely.
Did anybody go back and rewatch the 4-episode arc of the Clone Wars for them?
I did not.
I'm going to make a point to do that because I just want to see if he's just as cold in that.
A little foreshadowing.
Yeah, as he is in this episode, because I don't really remember that much about his character.
I watched it and enjoyed it, but my brain was so on the end game.
Yeah.
And even more so when I was watching the middle arc with Ahsoka, just my brain being on I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And that's all I could think about. So I actually should revisit the first 2 arcs of the 7th season.
So the guys, they talk their way through it. They kind of fake it and go back to their quarters before and then there's some more interaction between Hunter and Crosshair about, what really happened. And they kind of gloss.
There's that one part where they basically is like, does anybody, these clones act different to you? And Tech checks them with the, hey, what's your division number? And the guy,
yeah, just kind of, like
very
shrugs them off.
Stormtrooper-like thing to do, just shoulder check them and go,
Yeah, and they're like, I guess we'll just go back to our barracks then.
And then the idea that, in that scene where the 5 of them aren't wearing helmets, every single other clone is.
That's true, yeah.
And I think that's to hammer that idea home.
Yeah, very much so.
Individuality has been removed.
That's right.
Is it the scene with the Emperor before the mess hall?
Yeah,
I think
he comes in, he says mandatory meeting at...
Right, so we get the announcement we get the Emperor's big hollow. Tech is like, anybody think that they're not programmed now? The regs? I like that how he refers to them as regs, as in like regular clones. Right. And it's almost, I would say it's derisive, except it's coming from Tech, who, by the way, is already my favorite character in the show.
Well, I thought it was obvious.
Tech?
Hands down, Tech is my favorite character.
Yeah, I like Wrecker a lot.
Tech is that guy that he's the autistic kid that has no filter.
Yeah.
He'll say anything.
Yeah.
And you know what? He doesn't, all of his I thought it was obvious. Because to him, he does. He thinks it's obvious. Why? What do you mean you didn't notice that? And I love that there's an innocence in the way that it's completely innocent the way he delivers it.
It's like he already knows. He expects too.
Yeah, which just makes it so funny, right? When he says anything he says, pretty much. So yeah, we're introduced to Omega in this scene as we see the young human female standing beside Nala Se.
Hello.
Who, if you remember from the Clone Wars, was the chief medical officer or chief medical
scientist or
chief medical scientist, I think is her actual title. Yeah. And so just off the hop, it took me a second before I realized it, but you guys realize that Nala Se and Omega are both wearing the same
uniform.
Yeah. Not uniform,
colors and everything.
Right down to the little circlet chain with the brooch thing on her head.
That's right. And those colors are the same color palette that the Bad Batch is wearing too, which is gray, black, and white. Or sorry, gray, red, and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all, yeah.
So this is the first time we've seen, and she's very much got a New Zealand accent too when she starts talking.
My name's Omega.
Mm-hmm. Do we think that she is from the same genetic material as Jango Fett?
She's mixed.
How deep do we want to go into this theory right now?
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for, man.
There's a couple scenes where she's hiding in the shadows and it looks similar.
Yeah.
She's got the similar facial features as an older clone.
100% that she's from that genetic line. She's just a female version, and I think that they've tinkered with her DNA.
I think so as well.
And I think that there's another interesting thing here. her hair looks strikingly similar to a young Palpatine. Strikingly similar.
Oh, like episode 1.
Episode 1 Palpatine.
That's interesting
Her hair
too.
Yeah. And so,
is this
especially
early
in light of the things that happen later on in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, cloning is such a even I was going to say just the larger Star Wars itself, how prevalent cloning is as a theme throughout the entire saga, especially when you get to the end.
And might be a huge reach, but I also feel like that Nala Se has more of a sense of ownership or parenthood towards this clone.
I also felt that way, not because of anything that Nala Se did, but particularly with Omega. Is it this episode where she has a moment where she hides away on the ship? It's in the second episode, so I don't want to get too far ahead, but
right. She
has that moment where she's crying and she takes she takes it off and she never puts it back on after that. And I'm like, she's crying. Is that to suggest that she has a closer relationship with Nala Se than we're led to believe? Like there was a parentage thing there?
Nala Se has a big moment, and I missed it the first time watching it through. So when we get there,
okay,
I'll hit you with that and
see
if you guys caught it too. Nala Se has a big moment.
All right, so we get Sheev's big order about for a new society. And then everybody's like, "Oh, what the hell do we do now?" All right, so after the sequence with the Emperor, there's the interaction. They meet Omega in the hallway again.
Yeah, they're like, "Let's go, can't talk."
Yeah. So then we get to is this where we get to the cafeteria, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so in the cafeteria, here's another one. So the cafeteria scene's kind of neat. I find it this is more plot armor for me, and this is maybe part of why I'm a little nonplussed with the whole episode. Is there's that interaction as they're trying to have their meal, and they're getting, they're already ostracized by the regular clones, who the one guy shoves his way by and makes a point to call them the Sad Batch. And I'm like, this is so uncharacteristic of the clones after everything we've gone through over 7 seasons of Clone Wars where it's a brotherhood. And I want to go back and I want to talk about 99 because this is important. 99 is the namesake of Clone Force 99. Do you remember 99? The clone 100%. Maintenance worker?
100.
They revered that guy. Revered him, and even though he was just a simple maintenance clone, nobody gave him flack. Nobody ever called him out for his deformities. It is so uncharacteristic that these guys would do what they did in the mess hall, given the namesake. Clone Force 99 is named after Clone 99 and how he was treated. I just don't get it, and it took me out of it.
I'll see you there, and I'll raise you that was one single idiot.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's a little more of an argument for some individuality still maintaining there.
Yeah.
And although I'd say 99% of the clones,
no pun intended,
completely sympathized with and enjoyed and liked, there's that 1%, like fox.
Yeah, I was going to say there's always a fox.
So perhaps this is a fox.
For every wolf, there's a fox.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
That's the quote of the day. So I'll accept one idiot being an idiot, especially because it sets up a pretty cool scene.
It does. So we have the mess hall, the fight in the mess hall. Oh my Lord! And how is that?
Which is started by Omega, which is great because we're starting to see more and more. She's one of them.
Yeah, that's right. Like she breaks it up,
and it's important that idiot clone calls her one of them, and then the next thing that happens is she reacts like one of them.
Yeah, that's true. So now we'll focus on Omega for a minute here, because I'm curious to know, and of course we won't know until the series plays out, if she is subjected to the same cloning process as the other clones. Is she subjected to the accelerated growth that the other clones are? Is she going to grow up before our eyes over the course of the show?
That's a great speculation. She's certainly very new in terms of the next episode, especially, but that could also be a regular, 12-year-olds, or well, she's more probably like 6 to 8, but
she's been trapped on Camino her whole life. She has no idea what's outside that.
Cloistered and stuff, but I mean, ostensibly, she's even slower growing because
I don't know.
they always talk about 5 clones that were created for this, and even Tarkin makes a comment: "Is that all that remains? Like there were more.
How many are left?" And she says 5.
5, and everybody, and you're meant to think that Echo is one of them,
but he's not.
In fact, so much so that I had forgotten what happened to
about him
to
being
Echo
captured,
and Skako Minor,
right?
And when I saw him, I was just like, "Oh, that's one of the new Bad Batch guys. Where's Echo?" And I was looking right past him.
Yeah, kind of threw him.
Lauren was like, "No, reel yourself back in. That's Echo." And
yeah, that's
like,
him.
Oh, that's horrible. Oh, poor Echo.
Yeah. With his Lobot prosthesis.
Totally Lobot prosthesis.
Yeah.
There's another Easter egg, Lobot prosthesis.
Yeah. I like that.
Perfectly good explanation for why his chip didn't go off.
Right.
Because most of his brain was friggin' destroyed.
I love how they fit his helmet into the prosthesis, how it connects to that. I thought that's
fantastic.
Beautifully done.
Yep.
Actually, while we're talking about that, let's just talk about their armor for a second, at least their initial appearances. I can't help but think Hunter, when Hunter's helmet is off, and think about this for a second when you're watching it, the way that he talks, the way that he looks, his thought process, the fact that he's enhanced senses. Is he not John Rambo?
I was thinking more Solid Snake.
John Rambo. That's not lost on me. No.
Oh yeah, that's great, Andy. Solid
What's
Snake
that?
From Metal Gear.
Oh yeah.
So maybe he's a hybrid of some of those archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
No, and it's also that's if it's fan service, it gives us what we've got is, like you said, it's the Turtles dynamic.
I know that.
But
so
they're also picking things from like Rambo from the 80s and
right,
like Sniper from the 90s and
for those of you who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, the other day I was on a fan group that had showed a picture of the Bad Batch, and the comment was, "Come on, guys, this is just the 2014 Ninja Turtles." And so if you contrast the 2014 Ninja Turtles up against the Bad Batch, where Hunter is Leonardo and Wrecker is Raphael and Tech is Donatello, I guess that makes
would be Michelangelo.
It would be Michelangelo, yeah.
Cowabunga.
I just found it funny because it's like, oh my god,
great.
Yeah. This episode of Fandom Power is brought to you in part by CollectorsPlatoon.ca. CollectorsPlatoon.ca, organizers of the annual Toronto Collectors Platoon Toy Show. Check out CollectorsPlatoon.ca, the Canadian home of Ian's Display Accessories, specializing in action figure stands for figures of all scales. Visit CollectorsPlatoon.ca today.
I hope that there's like some more, because Wrecker's starting to get more playful with the members. Like he does face washes and stuff to them, and yells at them and stuff. He reminds me a lot of The Thing.
Yep.
And I really like that dynamic. And Zeb. He reminds me a lot of Zeb, although Zeb's not nearly as sort of dumb.
That's true. Yeah.
Wrecker's not dumb. He's very innocent.
Yeah, of course. He's got a very specialized role, and he's very aware of what that is.
And he wants to blow stuff up.
He says it in the cafeteria. I like to break things because I like to break things.
Exactly. I love Wrecker's armor. I love the paint scheme of his helmet, how it's evocative of that arachnoid separatist general. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
Way back in like episode 1 of the Clone Wars.
Right.
He was the guy for the first arc.
Orabesh 99.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of Orabesh in this episode and the next.
A lot. I didn't hone in on it.
I did not either. I was tempted to, but it was pretty late when I was putting my notes together. I'm like, maybe for another time. That being said, fans, if you guys picked up on the Orabesh, you can always drop us a line on any of our social media and fill us in on what the Orabesh actually says, because we love all that stuff. So after the mess hall fight, so they go back to their quarters. They start sort of talking about what's going on. They make some overt remarks, some not very kind remarks about the Empire and about Tarkin, just in time for the door to open and for him to hear it.
Well, that's after the because they're on their way back to the barracks.
Yeah.
When they're asked to go see.
Oh, that's right. They're supposed to be
summoned at the training facility.
Summoned to see the Prime Minister or something.
Clones even further.
Right.
And told to go right to the the training.
And they go directly to training.
Where are you going? You're due on the floor.
Right. So we're not in trouble.
Is up on his high horse there.
Right. Tarkin kind of gets off on this moment as he's watching them, because at one point I actually questioned on my second time around. I'm like, is he trying to execute them? Is he trying to kill them?
Well, he's trying to prove a point. He's trying to prove that they're not as good as he thinks they aren't.
Right. That's true. So,
and if they could be an asset, like
well,
if
this
you've got
is it.
resources, if these things are actually an asset.
Yeah. And this is where I'm still struggling with the cat's out of the bag. We didn't execute Order 66, and by the existing law, we should be put to death.
On paper, perhaps the Empire knows, and this is why Tarkin's here and not somebody else that we've never seen before.
Right.
Even Yularen.
Yeah.
Right? Tarkin's here because maybe the Emperor knows that one of the 5 clones, and now we're going to go
to the 5, yeah.
It's
not the 4,
something
the 5.
Special.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's something more, and maybe he's trying to elicit that more out of one of the ones that he's testing.
Right, so
That's
that he can dial in on who is it.
Right.
No, I hear you. And then, when you put it that way, as the Emperor, who is, I know it's kind of a throwaway line in the Rise of Skywalker, how he's back. The Emperor has come back, but he's the one who's been pulling the strings all along from the beginning.
All along.
Yeah. And so I think, if you don't pick up on that over the course of the 9 films, unfortunately, it's not. I don't think they spend enough time or enough emphasis on that, but that is the underlying thread, is that he was always, I don't want to say in charge, but he was always in charge.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So go to training, and interesting how they're training blasters. It never even occurred to me that, we've been in this room or similar rooms before with the clone cadets, with the clone cadets and similar situations, right?
And with the ARC Trooper training of when we got the first arc of 5s and the rest of the ARC Troopers.
That's right.
Yeah, they were also a defective. They were they were the worst performing group, and
yeah. So we get through the I don't want to say the dry fire or the test fire, the simulation with the training weapons goes off really well, and so Tarkin decides that he's going to up the stakes, and he orders the Prime Minister to switch to live fire. And that's where the Prime Minister makes his protest about, damaging my facility and damaging my clones. And so, again, the clones as property.
And there's a legacy line there. The Empire will compensate.
Yes.
Which is exactly what Vader says to Calrissian.
That's right. So if we're not treated to probably one of the biggest Easter eggs of the episode, when the floors open up and we get very much... No doubt in my mind, if you've followed our show and you know how much we talked about them in The Mandalorian, we are introduced to Phase 2 Dark Troopers.
See, now I was thinking that these might be like a Mark 1 or even a prototype.
Yep.
Certainly, regardless of what they are what they are. They're definitely Dark Troopers, and they're definitely early models. But the thing about this scene that drove me nuts was that we actually had Dark Troopers.
Yeah.
Before we had Stormtroopers.
To me, again, I've talked about this on other shows where we talked about the spirit versus the actual. And, I've always said, as long as the spirit of the whatever it is you're trying to do is maintained, I'm okay with it. And really having droids, I mean, Star Wars, for 3 movies was about, living creatures versus droids. So it doesn't surprise me that, the good guys would have been working on a droid solution of their own. So I can buy into it.
Absolutely. And you got to think, like, this is I'm having trouble with the word today, fellas. Kaminoan,
yeah.
Kaminoan facility.
Right.
Tarkin didn't just come in and put those droids there.
They were already there.
Right?
Yep.
So
if they're integrated cyborgs,
maybe that's plot armor, but maybe they stole the tech or the idea, but the idea that you would train your troops against droids or something, is absolutely 100%. It tracks 100%.
Absolutely. Star Wars is rife with that. Even Vader trained with droids.
Absolutely.
But if you look at Echo and how far he goes, like with all his, Tech makes a point of saying, you're not even that much clone anymore.
Yeah, that's right. You're more. So another legacy line. You're more machine than man.
Yep. So it's no stretch.
Statistically speaking,
it's no stretch to think that the Kaminoans are now integrating clone parts into machines.
We've just spent 3 years fighting droids. You can't tell me that the architect of the clone army is not studying droid technology to see if there's something there.
I can take this piece and I can take this piece and this will make this.
Our own history says that, captured enemy tech is always studied, and scrutinized very heavily.
Well, Operation Paperclip. I wonder
if Palpatine was sort of sitting back a little going, whichever side actually wins my puppet war.
is going to be the
troops we'll use moving forward.
That makes sense to me. Why wouldn't you? I mean, path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, droids are easily controllable, probably more so than a living force, as we see with the clones who are, capable of the full range of emotion and questioning morality and orders. And I almost wonder why he didn't go with droids.
Yes, a little, but it might be a money thing too, because we do see that the banking clan is involved, and that you see more financial sort of burden, even if it's a little bit. You see more financial burden on the separatist side. It must be more expensive to maintain robots than clones or even a conscripted force.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, we're I think we're off the rails a little.
Did I skip over AZ?
Yes. Yeah, because in the fight, there's Echo looks up and sees Tarkin, and him and Tarkin have a personal issue. Like there's a one-on-one thing that happened from that Skekko minor bullshit.
I missed that.
So he's paying attention to Tarkin when Tech says, "Echo, look out," and the guy, boom, with the tray, and he wakes up in the medical bay.
Right. Yes, that's right. I completely forgot that. I was pretty tired last night when I was doing this, so my apologies for that. After the training scenario, Clone Force 99 is dispatched to Onderon. We get to Onderon. We get off. So this is cool. Descriptive Audio told me that the name of the ship is the Havoc Marauder.
Havoc Marauder.
Which I thought is like a super cool name. Everybody's got to have a ship. It's a kind of Star Wars norm. It's going to be a recurring character, obviously. You don't name something that's not going to...
Right, if there's a main ship, it generally has a
name.
It
has a name, yeah. So the Havoc Marauder, which according to the second episode is a modified Omicron attack shuttle, which is the same shuttle that Maul used to escape the Star Destroyer. All right. Getting to Onderon. So now they've passed the test, Tarkin's test. And so his final test is, all right, I'm going to dispatch you to Onderon to eliminate a rogue separatist faction that's still, refusing to lay down their weapons. That's only right. To find out that it's a bunch of civilians. And the civilians are led by none other than Saw Gerrera, who is a nice evolution to the animation model of this character, where he's not Forrest Whitaker yet, but he's certainly, I mean, the hair is a little more nappy and longer. He just looks more grizzled.
There's another moment just before they meet up face to face where Crosshair has different members of the group in their sights, and
25.
Now there's children, and Wrecker's like, what are we going to do? I thought we were supposed to smash droids, and Tech's telling them there are no droids.
That's right.
And Crosshair's just give the order. Just give the order.
Well, this is
the whole time, if you notice, he's on the least dangerous person in the whole group. He's got his thing right on the forehead of a little old lady.
Yeah. I made a note about that. I said, Crosshair has no compunction about killing civilians and challenges Hunter's leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
I mean, that comes up a few times, this whole challenge of, are you the right person for the job? But you're right. There's a moment of, there's a whole dialogue portion where Saw Gerrera, I don't know who wrote the dialogue for him, but it's super well written, where he challenges sort of the belief of the Clone War may be over, but the Civil War is about to begin. And he sort of challenges the whole notion of what it means to be a person, a civilian or a citizen of this new empire, that it's not all cracked up to...
your personal freedoms are about to be taken away, and now instead of a clone army fighting for us, now we have a clone army fighting against us.
Right.
And that develops further in episode 2, huge steps.
Yeah.
I thought it was great to see, and that's part of what was really great about this episode for me, is we got to see Jedi, and especially Caleb Dune. We got to see Tarkin, and we get to see the cloning. We get to see all these elements. We get to see Saw Gerrera. We've got plenty of legacy characters and plenty of legacy plot.
Yeah,
and
I'm
really excited because it's a 16 episode thing, and I think we're going to get some really good payoff, especially with these threads. One thing about this scene in particular that really struck me, that I didn't really wrap my head around, is Republic fighters.
Yeah, me too.
Not clones, but regular dudes in Republic uniform
who just took up arms and
right. And so you see those little sort of common helmets that they're wearing in the scene, and that's like we're doing a tremendous amount of world building here.
Yeah, the idea that there was a military force that was not comprised of clones, and they were fighting too.
Just like on Mimban, where there's a military force for the Empire that is not stormtroopers.
Yeah, the Imperial Army trooper. Yeah, exactly.
And I love that stuff. If nothing more, got a new action figure to want.
Like the plate style helmet, it's pretty evocative of the First World War.
Yeah, and could we talk about another quantum leap in the animation again?
Sure, Ken.
Like this animation is just wow! It's so good. It's so good that there's a scene at the very beginning where Tech puts a bomb on a droid and there's an explosion, and then there's a shockwave that you see from a distance, and it washes over a few of the clones, and the effect of that shockwave. There's another quantum leap in the quality of animation. And it's been indicative ever since Clone Wars season 1.
It's like every show they do, they learn something, and there's all these little tips and tricks.
And I've heard some complaints about these 2 episodes saying that they feel like they've whitewashed the characters.
I
know people want stuff to complain about.
You mentioned that before, and on the rewatch, and I'm really looking at it, and the only you can't even call it whitewashing. It's part of the plot is Echo, who's basically his pallor is
pale.
Yeah,
and even the creators admitted that it's some of their new lighting tools.
Sure.
And that they're going to adjust it for the next 14 episodes to bring it more in line with the tonal. But nothing else about that seemed like.
I did not find anything off at all, to be honest with you. I thought it was just fine.
No, it was wonderful.
Speaking of animation models, and of course, Lucasfilm is famous for reusing assets. I mean, we saw every ship ever digitally designed in the Rise of Skywalker. I kind of snickered because, we've all, I don't know if Andy, have you watched Resistance yet?
Not all of it.
You've seen some of it?
Some of it.
I snickered when the Resistance shuttle is the shuttle model that's used in the second episode. I'm like,
that's right. Yeah.
Not a big fan of that design, but hey, it works. It's still Star Wars.
Can we take a moment though and give props to the poorest droid in the universe?
Which one?
That poor probe droid gets killed every time.
That's true.
He's just doing his job, just there to watch, and he's taking shots every time.
Well, that probe droid really brings up some questions about a couple of things. It calls back to the new politics of the galaxy. They even make a line to, the Republic never spied on us before.
They're always watching now.
Yeah.
There's that eye in the sky.
So, I mean, double entendre with the droid. Was the droid there to watch the spies, or is the droid there to watch the Bad Batch? Some combination of both.
I think it's there to make sure they do their job.
Right. I mean, Tarkin is still very suspicious of what's going on. And
he literally says this is to assess their loyalty.
Yeah.
Like we said, I don't know who he says it to, but it's not to them, certainly.
Was it to one of the? Oh, maybe it was to.
It was one of the
Kaminoans.
Yeah.
Kaminoans.
Right.
Cloners. One of the cloners.
Perfect. So Saw Gerrera after his big motivational speech, which, by the way, is not lost on Hunter, who very much is impacted by that, and they make a point of focusing in on him to he kind of gets it. Says, hey, the clones once helped us liberate Onderon, and we'll just give them the choice. So hands back his weapon, and then they switch off the last light, and they kind of wander off into the jungle, maybe never to be seen again on the show. Who knows? And that's when, there's another argument between Crosshair and Hunter, where, mid-argument, Hunter spots the droid and blasts it right over Crosshair's shoulder, which I might add. Killing the droid, and then we have that moment of like, we're being watched.
And that's the best way to establish dominance. Like there's that moment where Crosshair is like, are you going to
blast me in the face?
and it's his way of saying, no, I'm still fit for command. Not only can I assert my dominance over you, but I can save your life at the same time and take care of the entire. That's a really good moment actually.
Yeah. This is where Tech actually reveals that it's Omega is the fifth clone, not Echo.
Right.
As he's standing on the ramp to the ship to go back. Returning from Onderon, the plan is to pick up Omega and leave Kamino because she said, it's not safe here. She wanted to go with them, and he was hesitant to take her. So we start dipping into Mandalorian territory, right?
Right. And at first I was like, maybe this is too derivative, but it's a really good message, a message that we need way more of. And I think it might be, we always talk about hope being the essential theme of Star Wars, but but maybe the idea of parenting, the idea of
family,
of lineage, of children, of family, maybe it's a secondary thing to hope, because we watch ostensibly grandchildren, of characters that we grew to love, and ostensibly, and the children of the characters. So maybe it's equally about that. And so by reinforcing like the good parts of that,
right?
Certainly, it's going to be a different dynamic than
I think
Grogu
I think it plays into the. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I mentioned, and even the show has said in no very uncertain terms that the clones were a brotherhood. Well, that the dynamic of the brotherhood has just changed now that there's a sister. They never had a sister before.
That's right.
So maybe this is less of a parent thing and more of a sibling thing. But there's no there's no doubt that it does look and feel tonally similar to what happened with Grogu and Din Djarin. So I hope that is delineated and that it goes in a different direction, because that's part of, that's a little bit of where my disappointment lies. And it's like, oh, we've seen this before. Oh, and she's force sensitive. Oh, okay.
So now you have 4 clones and a little lady.
Not that I'm opposed to things that are derivative, because, hey, isn't everything derivative of something else?
Rhyming stanzas.
Right.
What George Lucas has always said. And knowing that.
To me, it was just a little too much too soon on the heels of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm going to reserve my, I got 7 more hours unless they drop
That's right.
more hour-long episodes on us.
Man, I don't know. That first episode coming in at 75 minutes?
Yep.
Wow, that was a long one.
It was a long one.
But, I mean, could it have been paced any differently? Maybe. But I think everything that needed to happen on camera did, for better or for worse. And you know what? Just TV in general, I'm of the opinion that you've got to give a show... sometimes 2, 3 or more episodes. We saw it with WandaVision.
100%.
Let it find its footing.
What I was thinking.
Let it find its footing. And if it doesn't after that, well, then, at least you gave it an honest go.
It certainly already has enough moving parts to keep me, especially the stuff from the second episode, actually.
Well, my philosophy, paint Star Wars on a rock and tell me it's new and I'll stare at it for half an hour, right? So no different with this. I love Star Wars enough that I will give anything a chance. So much so that I did power through the entire series of Resistance. Okay, so...
Yeah, that was tougher than this, I'll tell you that.
Yes, and I can remember nothing about Resistance. I can't even tell you the characters' names at this point.
The red stormtrooper, Captain Cardinal, is the only thing that jumps to my head. Nothing else.
Gold Phasma and Red Phasma, that's what I think of.
Yes, yeah, I
know. And then we go to prison. Yeah. And in the course of the incarceration, Crosshair is removed, because they want to see what compelled him to try to carry out the order. So, interesting turn. We talk a little bit more about the inhibitor chip, and Tarkin says, is the programming, essentially asks if it can be modified, if it can be reinforced, and Nala Se is like, yeah. So they subject him to a reinforcement of his programming, I guess it's called.
Yeah, they juice that chip.
Yeah, really. And then we don't see him for a little while. I guess the last time we see him is in the medical bay getting the procedure done. Come back to the cell, and we actually discover that, Kamino in the cloning facility predates the Clone War, so there aren't really any prison cells per se. There might be a holding facility, and they figured that there's a way to get out. So when we get to the incarceration point and they decide that they're going to get out, now they've locked up Omega with them, and right. Tech discovers that there is a way out. And it's like, you're telling me we can punch our way out? Which I loved. I thought it was like every joke you've ever made about Dwayne Johnson was encapsulated in that moment. He's going to punch his way out. And he's like, well, kind of. And they do. They find a panel and they break the panel. And of course, they get Omega. She actually volunteers to go through.
But just before, and the one thing was how I started to get us back where we were. But Omega, just before they take Sniper, she goes over and she not Sniper, Crosshair. Sorry.
Yep.
And she puts her hand on his knee and says, "I know what you're about to do."
Yeah, and she says,
"You don't have to do it."
And then she says it's not your fault.
So I immediately went, she's getting visions of the future.
Okay, so
I mean, immediately it was empirical to me that she was force sensitive in that moment, and I don't know if it's something else. I don't know if it's pattern recognition, and they're going to make it, maybe they all have sort of a precog. I don't know, but to me that spoke force sensitivity, and it's not the only time.
Yeah. This episode. All right. After the prison break, we're making our way to the Havoc Marauder, trying to escape because it's not safe here anymore, and we get jumped in the hangar. Omega actually tunes them to, because Omega and AZ, good to see AZ back. Such a quirky little character who could have been a throwaway character, but to see him come back in this, and it's interesting enough that clone did not blast him. He got stunned. He was shot on stun. So is that like AZ is going to come back? Do we think AZ is going to recur?
Probably.
I do, and because of the Nala Se thing that's about to come up, I absolutely think that we're going to see more of the
I think because they made a point to stun him and not destroy him outright, he's coming back.
Don't damage our property.
If he's not hiding on the ship already.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I never even thought about that, but you know what? That does make sense now. Because she tried to trick him into, it's a research assignment. And he's like, what? I love research.
Those are my favorite.
And her being a Nala Se, passing Omega off as her medical assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So where does her skill set lie in? Is she going to be
It's true, and she openly says, "Oh, you're talking about the inhibitor chips."
Right.
Like it's like
like it's nothing. Yeah, she knows.
Right.
So clearly she's post. Maybe she doesn't have one. At this point, it really doesn't matter. I mean, the Clone War is over. So unless we get into some situation where what we saw with some of the comic books with the what do you call them? The Purge Troopers.
That's right.
Where the programming is, activated to what was it, to turn on Vader?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So something like that. Sure. But I don't think
65.
Yeah, really. I don't think Omega has the same programming. I don't think she has an inhibitor chip, but I do think that there's something between her and Nala Se, and
I watched a little thing with Theory the other day, and he's speculating that maybe she's got the abilities of all the other four of them.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, you know what? Where did you learn to shoot like that? She's like, I don't know. I've never fired a blaster before.
Exactly.
She writes it off to being lucky. So, but she pegged him, and then just starts laying down a hail
weapon out of his hand.
Right, and starts laying down a hail of fire like that is the natural thing to do without any thought about it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And that was just a regular sidearm too. You notice it wasn't specialized. She just grabbed a clone sidearm.
So the
early derivative E11 or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's the DC-17, I think it is.
Yeah, DC-17.
So let's just talk about the flip side of her intuition. Her thing with Crosshair. As you say, if she has all of the genetic defects of all of them combined, is she just really intuitive? As a sister, does she understand him that well because they share the same DNA, or is it force sensitivity?
I mean, certainly that's dangled to keep you guessing. I don't want to know right away.
No.
Especially if there's a bigger plot point.
Yep.
I think that with her, the possibility of her being force sensitive makes her a really important target for the Empire. It makes the show about them being on the run and trying to survive kind of cool.
Yeah.
It certainly ties in with the storyline that's running congruently but in another timeline or in another sort of era, with Vader finding the Exegol cloning facility and Luke's hand.
Yep.
And my personal theory that's where he was getting the midi-chlorians from before Grogu. And so maybe this is and she's Omega, like the last, but maybe it's, maybe there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. Like, I have a lot of theories about that. So it would be kind of more rote if she had all their abilities similar to, like Captain Planet.
Yeah.
Something like that.
By your powers combined.
Kind of cool, but I think that force sensitivity is important in terms of moving the tying in the whole story. Like maybe this is the first iteration of Palpatine trying to figure out how to recreate this thing or preserve his life beyond his life.
Well, we're definitely going to get something because Tech goes out of his way to say every clone is made for a reason. What's her reason?
Right. Yeah. Before we get to the end of the episode, before they take off, let's just talk a little bit more about that hangar scene, that sequence with the big reveal of Crosshair in his new armor. We talked about it a little bit earlier, how it may be, sort of evocative of
Death Trooper.
That's what they're called. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Rogue One.
Yeah, his helmet is very much akin to what we would consider the classic Stormtrooper, but in black and fitted with a rangefinder. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Loved the, it was very much open the door. Oh yeah, that's a Stormtrooper. Right down to the seam down the shoulder pauldron that is not present with clones, but is with Stormtroopers.
That's right.
But it is definitely smoother across the legs and across the chest, where the Stormtrooper, at the knee has that little 3-box weird looking knee thing. Like that's not present on his. So yeah, somewhere between the common future common Stormtrooper and possibly the Death Trooper. And as you say, with the green lenses, it's very like, oh yeah, very cool though. I love that reveal. So, I mean, he's definitely going to make a better villain than he is a hero.
Sure. I love the toothpick, actually.
That's twice in the episode where he kind of spits it out there. And yeah. So as they finally mount up on the ship and they start making their... Oh, what did you guys think of Wrecker's teddy bear?
Yeah, it's pretty great. Especially when there's a scene where he's smacking Crosshair with it.
Yeah.
Earlier on in the episode, he's hitting him in the head with it a few times, going ooh, like
I just love how he's freaking out looking for it and he can't find it. He just like, what? It doesn't say a word about it. Like, not no, where is it? Just and then she just hands it to him and he's like, right. Oh. I have a soft spot. I can't help it.
That's another moment of her being hyper intuitive.
Yeah. As we close out the episode, they bust out of Camino. Oddly enough, there is no pursuit, which is contrary to the opening of the episode where they are escorted in and what's your clearance code. So these guys are now on the outside and nobody's trying to chase them down.
There's a tracker on the ship.
Here's the important thing, and I think maybe you guys did miss it. I know my second watch, I saw it. They're all on the ship. Like there's a lot of clones there firing at them and stuff. And someone yells, "Lock down the doors" or "Lock down the ship."
Right.
They just kind of flash to Namaste, and she's pushing a controller. And then Tech says, "Someone's holding the doors." And then they take off and fly off. Namaste lets them go.
She does. And there's a moment of dialogue there, too, because at that moment she turns. She's in a room with the Prime Minister, with Lama Su. And Lama Su says, was it resolved? And she's like, yes, but the remaining clones have escaped. With Omega.
Right.
And then he makes a point to say, then we better keep our mouths shut until we know what's going on.
I don't try until we know what the Empire's new intentions are.
Right.
But he does give her a sideways look.
So, like, again, something is going on Camino. The Caminoans are not, clearly there's a question of loyalty here where, I mean, they're like ostensibly like business people. That's so, right. I mean, I figure they're kind of in it for their own means, what's best for them.
And even business people are always in it, even before it's self-preservation. Inevitably, the massive wealth is about self-preservation and the preservation of your way of life or your progeny or whatever it is.
Right.
And if she knows that Omega's on that ship, she has an interest in preserving that ship.
And she knows Omega's possibly force sensitive. She knows that the Empire is going to want the frig out of her.
That's true. So all roads kind of point towards force sensitivity for me. I like the idea that maybe she is just very intuitive, but at the same time, it just the overarching narrative and what we know about Star Wars, the chances are, and she may not even be, she may never exhibit a single force power, but if she's just intuitive all the time,
right? Like a latent force ability.
Yeah, yeah,
right. And Lauren said a scary thing to me. She goes, "She's not going to turn on them and grow up to be Phasma, is she?" And I went, "No, don't say that. Don't even speak that into existence."
Having such a horrible use of that character. I should hope not.
really
I really hope not. Omega grows up to be the Boba Fett of the film franchise and dies in a hole.
Non-union equivalent. Boba Fett.
So it's Omega that actually suggests maybe some of your friends out in the galaxy can help. And Hunter's like, oh, we know a guy. And he says, let's plot a course for J19.
J19.
And they keep that a nice little secret. And then it's like, hey, you want to strap in for this. You don't want to miss this view, kid. And so she does. And the pure joy on her face as you see the stars stretch into hyperspace reflected in her eye, which is super cool.
And she's watching Tech do all the movement. She's watching, so she's learning how to fly a starship right there.
You think so? Yeah, why not?
Him hard.
Yeah, for sure.
He's flipping different switches. She's, Hunter says, look forward, pay attention to what's about to happen, but she's looking at Tech.
Yeah.
And then she looks up as they.
Yeah.
And that's a great shot of the hyperspace lines reflected in her eye.
And that wraps the first episode. So, man, it's a good episode. It's a solid piece of Star Wars. It adds to the canon, adds to the, to what the world building, as you say, Hank.
It had all kinds
does
of
that in spades.
Legacy characters. It had all kinds of stuff that I wanted to know politically about the world start to happen. It had things that it was hard for me to watch clones act like jerk offs.
Yeah.
On the second viewing, I was really stoked. I really enjoyed it. We're about to do it, but I liked the second episode even more.
Yeah, the second episode builds right off of the first episode and really digs into that familial aspect of the brotherhood, now the new emerging sisterhood. But this is where the lines get blurred even a little bit more, because in this episode, we're going to go and visit a character that we've met before who has some experience with kids.
You're listening to Fandom Power.
Yeah, so episode 2, this one, it's called Cut and Run. This one debuted Friday, May 7th, 2021. And this one is interesting because you guys remember D.B. Weiss and David Benioff at one point were going to do a Star Wars project?
Yep.
So Weiss and Benioff were the creative team that did Game of Thrones. The guys who came out and admitted that we actually don't know how to do anything, which may or may not have contributed to their departure from Star Wars. Well, interestingly enough, this episode is written by a lady by the name of Gursimran. Oh, I'm going to butcher her name. I'm so sorry. Gursimran Sandhu. And she was a staff writer for season 8 of Game of Thrones. So she doesn't have a writing credit because she was a staff writer, but she worked on all 6 episodes. So that's interesting. And then this one is directed by Stuart Lee. Again, refresh on Stuart Lee. 23 episodes of Clone Wars, 15 episodes of Rebels, and 19 episodes of Resistance. And he is the sole director for this episode.
Yeah, we're still in good hands.
Yeah, very much so. Episode synopsis for this one. The Bad Batch and Omega arrive on Salakami to meet with the clone deserter, Cut Loquain. Cut tells Hunter about the inhibitor chips and about his plan to escape with his family now that the military presence is increasing. The two discover that chain codes are now needed to book public transport, but no, Cut will get arrested if he tries to get one. Tech and Echo manage to steal some chain codes and, with Omega's help, deliver them to Cut and his family in time to board the transport. Hunter attempts to leave Omega with Cut, as he thinks that she needs a family, but she decides to stay with the Bad Batch. Now, this one departs from our previous episode. It departs from Aftermath in that this now is a fully on its own Bad Batch. There's no Clone Wars connection. The fonts have actually changed. So when Cut and Run comes up on the screen, the title card, it's actually in a different font and a different color. That's so right. We are now fully broken away from the Clone Wars. And yeah, so basically the show opens with the Havoc Marauder landing on Salakami, and right away we're treated to one of our first Easter eggs, the Nexu.
The Nexu.
Yeah, so Nexu, the cat multi-eyed cat creature that was in the Geonosian
Colosseum.
The Colosseum, yeah. The one
that ruined Padme's back for life.
I was going to say the one that turned Padme's shirt into a crop top.
Can't imagine she healed perfectly from those. Well, I guess they do have back to tanks. So
I figure enough time and enough back to you can come back from a lot. Apparently, you can't grow a hand back though.
No.
Apparently, you have to have enough genetic material to heal before it actually works.
Bosk can in the new comics. Bosk can regenerate limbs.
That makes sense though, given as a reptile. That's cool.
He's dirty. They actually steal Han Solo from Boba Fett. It's great. You should check out the Bounty Hunter Wars.
Okay.
It's anyway. I'm getting off the rails.
Nope, it's all right. It's all right because I think you know what, Bounty Hunter is probably going to play a big part in this series. To be honest with you, I mean, the Empire can't be everywhere all the time, but
right. The only place to hide is the underworld.
Well, that's it, right? Yeah. So who better to go after people in the underworld than bounty hunters, and certainly I'm sure that's how we're going to get Fennec Shand. As we saw, Fennec Shand is already been revealed to be a character in the series.
That's right.
She's probably going to be one of the people on their tail, whether she flips or not. They
leaked in a Twitter, some Rex is going to appear. So
is he? Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. I did not know that. Now I'm more excited. That's good. All right. So we have the next who live here. There's a whole little bit of dialogue as they leave the ship and they're actually walking towards the homestead. And there's a line about trusting a deserter. And Tech with his, no filter. We're all deserters now.
Mm-hmm. But just before you get that, you do get a wonderful depiction of Omega as childlike, I don't know anything
that's
yet.
Right, yeah.
Because she takes her first step
playing
on dirt.
With the dirt.
What is this?
And they're like, what are you doing?
That would be dirt.
It's diametrically opposed to Anakin's view on the same thing, too.
On dirt?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe Anakin, less sand, more dirt.
Yeah, maybe. It's cool, though, to see her, like you say, she's never been, well, she says, I've never been anywhere. So for her to stop and feel the warmth of the sun on her face and actually turn her head up into the sky and then to, kick at the ground and stop to pick up the dirt and just playing with it. And I'm thinking, I kind of think back to my own childhood and I'm like, was I ever that innocent? And I don't remember.
Well, we grew up in the environment. If we had been introduced into it, certainly.
Yeah.
It's very similar. It's indicative of that when Rey's on the bridge of the Falcon with Solo and Chewbacca when they land on Kanata's homeworld, Takodana, and she sees trees for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's right.
True.
Because she lived on Jakku.
I've never seen this much
yeah,
green in my life.
Yeah.
And Han Solo's like, there's lots of green, man. Like, cool it.
So they finally arrive at the homestead, and it's worthy of noting that this homestead has actually got a pretty decent fence around it, which we come to find out later on is for a reason. It's not just to, keep the kitties in the yard, but yeah. And we're introduced, or reintroduced, I should say, to Cut and Cut's wife, Sue. So
That's the title of the episode.
Yeah, so we were introduced to Cut back in the Clone Wars, where he was a deserter. And I can't remember the arc particularly well, but I know there was some discussion about trying to bring him back into the fold, and he had more to live for where he was because of the family.
Rex was injured in Fives, and
yeah, that's right.
I remember who brought him there just to they saw a farm, and it happened to be Cut's farm.
Right, and they identified him as like, you're a clone.
Right, and they had to leave and go back and fight, and they left Rex in his care, and that's sort of how.
Yeah.
First, Rex was going to turn him in.
That's right, but that evolved. I mean, with the whole family thing and having a wife and children, and that sort of changed the dynamic and really influenced Rex and sort of his outlook about what it means to be just one more awesome. What made the Clone Wars awesome was that evolution of the, being able to question, and have a moral compass that, everything's not black and white like it would be for a droid. So
yeah, that arc went a long way to humanizing the clones.
Big time.
You really got to see it and understand why a guy could walk away from that, because Rex literally says in those episodes, like, but our brothers were dying, and he just throws it right back at him. But our brothers were dying.
Yeah.
Like, so you see the two flip sides of that coin, and they both make incredible sense.
Yeah, they do. They totally do. I'm curious to know, like, what the connection is, though. Like, clearly, because in the dialogue, there's this, like, they start talking about what's happened. And so Order 66 and the slaughtering of the Jedi and the inhibitor chips. And then the whole, like, oh, yeah, Rex told us about the inhibitor chips. And they're like, what? Why? Rex was here? Well, he just passed through yesterday. I'm curious to know what the connection is, because now we've established that they all know each other. But we've never seen them. We've never seen them all interact with each other. So I'm curious to know how that's going to go. I mean, technically they've interacted. I mean, that the four episode arc, but you know, we don't know how tight these guys are. Like, are they, you know, it's not like say Cody and Rex or Rex and Wolf, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
That there is,
he's willing to leave Omega with Cut.
Well, that is the overarching, you know, sort of theme. One of the themes to this episode is sort of the bonds of family, and again, at the expense of drifting into Mandalorian territory, where it's like you have a group of elite fighters, and this is where I'm like, I'm looking at Hunter like he's John Rambo, eh? Like he's like going through. You can see him wrestling with.
They drew first blood, not me.
He's wrestling with the idea of like his own ability to look after this kid. And we see that when Cut and Sue's kids come in, and they have a moment of like, we don't see kids here. Who are you? And she's like, I'm Omega. And they go outside to play. And in the playing with the ball, the two kids turn to go inside. And Omega, a kid being a kid, intentionally boots the ball beyond the fence line.
That's right. And
in going and getting the ball, we have our second encounter with the Nexu. So turns out that fence is to keep the kiddies out, to keep the kiddos in, but the kiddies out.
Right. Noah does say in the last episode, she has a curious mind and is constantly getting into trouble, if you will.
Well, she certainly got herself into trouble here. And so here's the dichotomy, or the contrast of styles, is once that situation is resolved and Sue kind of drives it off with her rifle, Hunter immediately, like, do you know what you just did? Like, you could have been killed. And Cut is very quick. He's the complete opposite. He's the doting father, and it's like, whoa, she's not a soldier.
She's not a soldier.
And he goes right into the parental, the very, very paternal, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Everything's going to be fine. She needs a little time. And you see Hunter wrestling with, like, what the hell just happened?
Right. And the first member of the group to mimic it is Wrecker, actually. Wrecker is the first one to go, are you okay? Like mimicking, like, oh, this is what we're supposed to, this is how we treat Omega. And he's the first one to mimic it. I noted that.
Well, look at Wrecker, though. And I mean,
they share a moment too on the ship.
In his own, so, and I don't want to take anything away from the character because I think he's great, but in his own simplicity, let's go back to the previous episode, and he's the way that he talks to Caleb Doom. Hey, little Jedi! Like, it's like he's the, I don't want to say, but he's like the, he's like the cool uncle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
He's already got, he shares that childlike innocence because of his own mental state, I guess.
That's right. I agree.
And they do point that out on the ship just as they're arriving to the planet, because they're like, hey, look at this. And both of them are passed out in the back.
Yeah.
And he's got his little teddy bear.
Well, that's it too. And the teddy thing and her giving it back to him, like, it kind of establishes that there's a kinship there, that, and maybe that's more of the sibling thing and less of the father thing.
If there is any parenting dynamic, and certainly there has to be, it'll be about each one of those characters being a different aspect of the parent, and therefore the brother.
Yeah.
And so where Mando has to figure it out by himself.
Yep.
We see in this moment, Cut gives them everything they need. You know what I mean? This is how you treat a child in this situation.
Yeah, all in like what, 2 or 3 lines?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, super powerful though, and the sense of like it's conveyed very, very well.
Oh yeah. I started thinking though, like, is it because there's no Jedi there that Cut doesn't Order 66 and Cut?
Yep.
Let's discuss that.
Okay, sure.
He doesn't seem to exhibit a reset, aggressive tendencies, or perhaps his chip was defective in the first place, which allowed him to even just do things that even Rex couldn't do, which is just shirk duty.
I guess. I mean, we saw Rex.
Maybe we're going to get into. Maybe we'll see the character again and get into it more. He hasn't, because they tell him about the inhibitor chips, and so does Rex.
Yeah,
he's not wearing a bandage. Rex didn't just remove it.
No, that's true.
Shaved.
Is this
a
another
few questions about Cut's inhibitor chip?
Is this another example of the Purge Trooper thing where they never had theirs removed either? Like they still have it, and it becomes this clever plot device where it could come into play later on.
Possibly.
If Jedi are introduced in the show and somebody knew the correct trigger, like execute Order 66, would he go off?
And there you have. I think you maybe just hit it there.
Yeah,
because he was nowhere near a transmission.
That's right. He did not receive the order.
Given the order.
That's what I mean.
Yes. So, and there's a precedent in the comics. I can't recall the comic, but it's the Star Wars comic. The story occurs between A New Hope and Empire.
Yeah.
No, actually, it's between Empire and Jedi. It's Luke looking for his lost lightsaber.
Okay. Yeah.
And he encounters a Jedi who there's a bunch of clones, and he essentially is fighting dark Jedi or dark Force users, and he screams Order 66, and those clones turn on the dark Jedi.
Yeah.
And he escapes.
Right.
So it's literally the word is the impression that you get from that. Like, I always look at the dog and then look at Lauren, and I say the dog, Order 66, and nothing ever happens.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, so I mean, if
Lauren hates it.
him essentially, living off grid, has afforded him that sheltering from that. So he's never been. I
think I might have answered my own question.
Yeah, he's just never been subjected to it.
Right.
Yeah, his own isolation, which is another theme of the episode, because he's already decided that, as if this place that he's living in is already not off the grid enough, he's come to the conclusion that with this new empire, we just need to fade away to a quiet part of the galaxy and live out our life.
It begs the question, is the order given once, and once you've heard it, that's it?
Yeah, is it repeatable?
Or is it like, is there a signal streaming?
Well, this is it. Like, I wonder, because this goes back to that whole, like, did everybody get it in their helmets at one time? Like, because some indications are like, yeah, they did. And other indications are like, well, maybe it was just sent down to the commanders and the commanders disseminated that.
It would have to be super close to simultaneous for it to work.
I always felt like it was I don't know why. I always felt like it was a one-time thing, like a one and done.
Yeah.
Because
I did too. I was given the impression. Yeah.
I kind of feel like, because once you give that order, I mean, there's two options. You either live or you die.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
certainly.
If that's your mission in life, is like, okay.
Especially if you're not just like sitting on a ship somewhere, especially if you're standing beside a jet
right.
when it's given.
Right. And how many?
And I guess with a domino analogy, it has to start and it has to stop. And it is all one motion.
The Jedi to clone ratio during the war was so skewed that not every clone was in a position to have sights.
That's the thing that's not super evident in the movies, that they don't that we lost so many Jedi.
Yeah.
The Battle of Geonosis, it's not fun.
I mean, don't they allude to that, even at the time of the Phantom Menace, that there's just like a few thousand Jedi in the galaxy? Not like tens of thousands, but like maybe 10,000, maybe?
I don't know if it's ever explicitly.
I don't think it is either.
Stated in around the time of the Phantom Menace, but we're certainly at the end of their heyday.
Their numbers have diminished for whatever reason at this point, anyway.
I'd like to look into that.
Me too.
But certainly we lost thousands of Jedi at the Battle of Geonosis. Thousands.
Yeah, I mean, you look at anything Old Republic, whether it's the MMO, and the MMO does a great job at sort of suggesting that, like, yeah, there was way more at some point in galactic
even in the
history.
High Republic, there's 40,000 Jedi, and even more in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, and even more there are Jedi that have gone their own way.
This is it
really
too,
trying
right?
to get into the gray area of Jedi and
that whole
Force
expanded
that don't prescribe. To
the old EU, what we call alternate Force traditions, right?
That's
like right. Your Witches of Dathomir and your your Jedi, and there's a few other orders of like Force users that exist out there, but
right, like even like racially, like the original Sith was a race of beings
that's
that
right.
wielded the Force,
right. So this is cool that the whole idea of besides getting in trouble and then having that moment where she's kind of, consoled by Cut, it's cool to see. It's an aspect of the clones that we've never seen before, because from hatching, from incubation right until departure with the Grand Army of the Republic, it's been combat, 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 combat. To see, it's one thing for a human child to be a child, but what is it like for a clone to just be a child?
Yeah, I mean, we're not really privy to what kind of training she had, and
no,
she's called a lab assistant. She's even the Jerkoff clone, we'll call him Jerkoff.
Yeah,
calls her a lab scrubber.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So who knows what kind of training she's had, but certainly.
Well, is it training?
There's genetics involved, because they're just like, ostensibly they've cloned Jango Fett. There's the body memory is involved. They've accelerated the aging, and they're just like refining the process by having them do the physical training. So when you see her pick a weapon up at however old she is, 8 or even accelerated, she could be 3 or something crazy, and it has that Jango Fett DNA. Yeah, that body memory that's inherent. It's not a crazy stretch, but maybe that means she's had the physical combat training as well. Like maybe she's gone through the
part of me wonders, and I definitely I believe all of that. I can see that being exactly laid out the way you describe it. Part of me questions, because of the inhibitor chip thing. Let's call it what it is. It was a failsafe for the Emperor. So I mean, if they could build in a failsafe, for the Emperor, in the event of something happened to the the Jedi, could the Kaminoans not build in a failsafe to protect themselves?
I believe there was.
And is Omega that the first success of whatever failsafe they put in? Like there's some programming within her that is currently dormant that may be activated later. A la Jason Bourne, maybe.
Certainly.
Yeah. So. That's kind of where I am at with that. I think there is more to this character that is going to come out over time, and I love speculating about it.
So Order 65?
Maybe?
No. I was joking earlier, but I just looked it up. So this isn't necessarily canon, but it's comic book and novel stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Order 65 was one of 150 contingency orders that the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic were trained to carry out in the event of different emergency scenarios during the Clone Wars. Order 65 stated that if a majority of the Senate or Security Council declared that Supreme Chancellor, at the time Palpatine, was unfit for duty, the Chancellor was to be arrested and, if necessary, killed.
Interesting.
So they were also programmed with an order to... Yes, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Let's face it, Palpatine didn't put the chips in them.
No, he didn't.
The cloners did.
That's right. Interesting. So, but somebody would have had to have, sent over, here's a list of all the things that need to be built in.
Sure, and they just tucked their own in.
Yeah.
But I'd love, as a deep crazy nerd, I'd love to see the whole canon list of 150.
Yeah, really. I want to know everything that's built in there and how do we get it out? Wait, we totally glossed over this, and I meant to go back to it. I'm so sorry. Can we back up a second? Going back to programming and clones. What the hell were the Coruscant Guard doing on Kamino to begin with?
Ensuring a smooth transition into the Empire.
Is that what we're calling that?
I think so.
Did they show up with Tarkin, or did he come independently?
They've always said that they're loyal to the Emperor first.
Right.
Or loyal to Palpatine. They're Palpatine's personal regiment, right?
So the little bit
they
of
were
reading,
never loyal to the Jedi.
The little bit of reading that I
loyal
did
to the Supreme Chancellor.
Yeah, what little reading I did on the Coruscant Guard is that they over time supplanted the Senate Guard. And if you're not familiar with the Senate Guard, if you go back to the Phantom Menace, they were the blue-robed guys with the big plumage on their helmets.
That's right.
Which I just presume that the Senate Guard naturally evolved into the Imperial Royal Guard.
Right.
But what I read about the Coruscant Guard suggests that they were actually two independent forces. Both sharing that loyalty to the Emperor, as you say.
They're just the clone regiment assigned to the homeworld of the Senate, but then under direct control of the Supreme Chancellor, not under control of the Jedi.
But that, rest of the clones. And we just went right off into the weeds there. But does that not just beg the question, what other failsafes are in there? If you say to me that the clones are loyal to the Emperor, but the Emperor did not put the programming into them, the cloners did. they have to have a fail-safe. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't. You're talking about the. I don't want to make a dumb reference, but like the Ferengi of the Star Wars universe. Like these guys are the consummate business people. We're talking probably hundreds of billions or trillions of credits worth of goods.
It's just good business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, these guys are probably well entrenched and well off, that they're not immune to, looking after themselves.
Let's pretend that they're a sneaker company, and let's pretend they're Nike.
Yeah.
Nike is making billions of shoes.
That's right.
But not for only one market.
No, they're making it for everybody.
They're also not in the habit of, like, I can't phone Nike up and be like, I need one single pair of custom shoes.
No, I need like 200,000 pairs.
So the Republic, while maybe their largest contract, can't have been their only contract.
Yeah, that
and they've
much,
been in business ostensibly for a very, very long time.
Yeah, because you don't just clone a living being overnight.
Right, or what the story would have been then was the creation of a Republic cloning facility, and their, how they created it, how it was secretly created. No, this was just a group of beings that existed, and there was a planet you could go to, and with enough money and maybe charisma, you could have an army built.
And I mean, let's not forget that Camino was removed from galactic databases. Like, nobody knows where it is. Mm-hmm. There are very few people actually know where it is.
That's right.
So, I mean, is that their fail-safe? Are they banking on the fact that nobody knows where we live, so we don't need protecting, we don't need a standing, security force or military? Maybe that's sort of the Achilles heel for them. I don't know. But I'd like to think that they're smarter than that. If you can create life, you're smarter than that.
I say good business is where you find it.
Right. So back to where we are here. We just get through the, you could have gotten killed. And then there's this whole idea of, things are getting tight. We got to get out of here. And so the thought of, moving off world is talked about, but not before we find out that we can't book passage anymore, because now, Republic credits aren't enough. We have to have a chain code.
Those credits won't do you any good without a chain code.
And this is what, upon the second viewing, I started to think this is less derivative of the Mandalorian and more its progenitor.
Yeah,
the themes that are being set up here, we've already actually seen some of them come to fruition.
Yeah,
this is where the themes are set in motion. And
the whole idea of a chain code, as it's presented to us in the Mandalorian, I just thought of it as that's your family tree.
And chain, I was thinking DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now it makes complete sense that it's a Big Brother-esque registration system. And it starts with, they mentioned ships before people.
That's right.
Because they come in, like, what's your registration? We don't have a registration, which is another, I guess it's not a legacy line at this point, which is another sort of nod to the Mandalorian, where he says, no, my ship is pre-Empire, so I don't have a transponder.
Yeah.
I don't have a code that, so that, I mean, that's really cool too. That's a nice link.
Oh, that's a good link. Yeah, that is a good link. I think of the way that Boba presents his chain code to Din Djarin, and it's a point of pride for him. Like, you can see it here. See, this is my chain code. This is me. This is my father. Right. My father before him.
And if you got to have one, then you have one.
Yeah.
You'd think Boba would have had a fake one or a hot one.
Yeah, but I guess in that sense, he wouldn't really need one.
Well, so here
he doesn't need to fake it.
We just found a plot hole, my friend.
Yeah.
How can Django have a chain code if they were invented years after his death?
I don't think they were. I think chain code as a piece of identification that's the hitch. Using it as a means to identify yourself. I still think chain code as family tree, and everybody has one of those. But if you're a clone, you have no chain code because you were created. Your chain code. They're
literally saying that you have to line up and register for a chain code. They're
right.
going to assign you one.
Right. So that as a means of, like, controlling the population, I think that's the new component. I think chain codes, as a thing, have probably always existed, but they were just never used as a means of identification.
Right.
It
feels super relevant to the world right now for me.
Think of it as everybody's got a birth certificate, but it's not always, maybe that's a poor example, but I think that they've always been
more
around.
Nefarious than birth certificate.
Absolutely it does.
Maybe birth certificates are nefarious just because we were born into that world.
Maybe.
We don't feel that way.
That's true.
But your new vaccine passport might be.
Always the danger of a new generation
that.
being born with less and less freedom.
Right. So this whole...
It's normal to them.
The whole talk of chain codes leads us into, how do we do this? How do we get them? And how do we get Cut and his family off-world?
There's a great line here, too. Basically, Hunter asks Tech, can you hack it? He goes, well, I just heard about it, but yes.
I love that line. And that, again,
it's a great line.
The guy is he's so brilliant and has no filter. Yeah. Just a simple, straight up yes.
I just heard about it, so yes.
Oh, my God. I hope he makes it through the whole series. He's so good. So they start hatching a plan to get these chain codes, but this is at the point where Omega is having her little moment where she's now like a child would, and we can think, back to our own childhood experiences where something, traumatic has happened to you, where you just run off in the corner and you just want to hide and be alone, and maybe you cry and you have your moment, and that's what she's doing on the ship.
Sort of not explicitly laid out, even in life, but when a child is being admonished or gets in trouble, they only have the intellectual capacity to think a certain way, and that way is, what have I done that's wrong?
Yeah.
Right, like they haven't learned that whole like different points of view and the sort of empathizing with others and taking on their emotions and feelings and considerations. They only know themselves, so they literally think that they're to blame, and
and doesn't every child
with divorce and yes, that's the hit. I think it's very sort of simple that people don't realize that's the way all children internalize, that sort of trauma. So yeah, she does the same thing, which is
you can take a clone and you can fill them full of all of the informational stuff that they need to function in society, but you cannot program emotional intelligence.
No,
that's experience based.
Yes,
and so now she's having these experiences for the first time, which is interesting that they didn't really dive into that as much with the clones throughout the Clone Wars, emotional intelligence, because, you spend a couple of years in a training facility and all you're doing is combat and you're not processing any other emotions. Once you're out in the world, there's no safety net. You're at your own devices to deal with that. And I'm surprised that more clones didn't mentally cave because of that.
No, it's true. And we might see that now, a la Winter Soldier, that they have the time to decompress.
Yeah. And reflect on, cracks, 3 years of war.
Right. And for them, an entire life.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's a good point. That you just hit on a really good point.
Yeah.
So despite the age of, and I think we might have answered one of our questions from earlier, despite however physically old Omega is.
Yep.
Ostensibly, she's no older than 3.
Well, this is what I mean. I mean,
so
even
100% accelerated.
Even the oldest clones that would have had to have been in development prior to the war, 3 years of war, plus however time it took to grow a clone from embryo to adult.
Well, how old do we figure Boba is in Attack of the Clones? Because there's our answer. He has not been aged.
In Attack of the Clones.
There's our answer right
I thought it was around 10 years.
I thought he was about 10 years old as well. So
there you go. They've been cooking. So Sifo Dyas applied 45 years before the A New Hope.
That's right.
Is what we're talking.
Yeah.
So this, and then you're actually talking that Palpatine was in his teens.
Yeah, I guess so, eh?
Yeah.
Wow. So murder came to him very young.
Sure. Unless he is Darth Plagueis.
Well, there is that. That's still floating around out there, isn't it?
It's still floating around out there.
Yeah. Who could create life?
Right.
All right. So Omega takes her amulet off her head, and she has this moment where she's crying, and that's where I kind of go back to like, oh, is she? Because she takes it off and she stares at it pretty intently for a couple seconds, and I'm like, is she missing? Like, is it like I miss my mom? Like
she's questioning her choice right there.
Is she questioning her choice?
Yeah. Well, I never cried. I never cried before.
Probably not.
There was nothing ever that could have harmed my life before. No one ever yelled at me before.
No.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, she's questioning her decision in that moment.
Yeah. But yet at the same time, like I said, that the amulet never goes back on her head after that, for the rest of the episode. It's off.
Yeah.
So we have this, she's there having her moment as she's sitting in the jump seat, and then Tech and Echo are hatching their plan about how we're going to get the chain codes, and they're like, well, if the chain codes are controlled at the spaceport, then we've got to get into the spaceport. And how do we get into the spaceport? Well, from an earlier scene, we see that the Empire has been going around and has been impounding ships. For reasons. They're just impounding ships for reasons.
Control reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So they decide, well, of course, if you want to limit a population's movement, then you take away their ability to move, right?
Yeah.
So they hatched up this idea that we're going to get the Havoc Marauder impounded, and that way, that'll get us into the spaceport. Seems like a good idea at the time, but as Hunter points out, there's one small problem with that, and that's Omega is actually on board the shuttle with them as they're getting lifted away.
Be part of the extraction team,
which is funny because she kind of turns around in the seat and she waves and says, "I think it's a good plan." So she's right on board with it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but there's a little bit more going on there because Cut and Hunter have this whole conversation about, you're going to get off the planet and I want to leave her with you because you can give her a life. That I just can't. And I don't know if it's an I can't or we can't, because at this point I'm still confused. Is Hunter looking at her from the perspective of a father? I'm not.
He doesn't know how to lead this soldier.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's probably the best.
If you asked the same question of Wreck, you'd have a totally different answer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yes, and this is why each character is going to have to find their version of parenting, if you will, or brotherhood with her.
Yeah.
And I think that you're going to see a lot of different aspects of that. It's a slightly different dynamic than what you get with Grogu and Din Djarin.
It totally is. There's with Grogu being so diminutive, physically speaking, there's a propensity to look at him as a baby, hence the term Baby Yoda. And what does everybody think about babies? That they need to be protected.
Helpless.
Yeah, helpless and need to be protected. Whereas, like in this episode, Omega even makes a point at the end of the episode to mention how she's like, I know I messed up and I have a lot to learn, but you don't need to get rid of me. So it's not, it's different. She's already sort of, she's trying to, argue her value, her worth. She's like, yeah, I know I have a lot to learn, but.
It's almost an inverse thing where you have Grogu being 50, but having.
Yeah.
Almost no ability to communicate with the world, and her being 3 and having advanced capabilities of getting, clearly she's really emotionally intelligent. Like she's coming on it fast.
Yeah.
So while Grogu ages slowly, she's aging quickly. So I think that's a dynamic that's not lost on me.
And if we think that she really is just 3 years old, then that is the answer to the, is she accelerated?
Yeah. Even if
the
she's
growth thing.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere in that ballpark, right?
Even if she's 10, she's not far.
Exactly.
She's not far off of the same age as Boba.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we get to the spaceport, and it's this whole. It's like this whole comedy of errors. It's almost like Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello-y. The two of them bantering back and forth about, going in and getting the cards, the chip cards, and, trying to not raise an alarm, and the banter between the two. Do you want to come out here and try it?
Yeah, no, it's great. And it gets the exposition across, but in a really fun way.
Yeah. So
banter is some of the best parts of Star Wars. Too.
It is. And they're finding it. I don't know if they've got it down 100%, but they're definitely finding it. And this was a great example of when it's good, it's really good. So
and again, we have D. Bradley Baker just acting off himself.
Yeah, and it's, how can one guy voice essentially tens of thousands of characters and they all come off as slightly different? Never once did I ever question, like who's talking. Maybe because not only are you staring at them, but even if I was to, I think close my eyes, I would have a pretty clear indication of like which clone I was talking to.
That's right.
Certainly with the main ones anyway. So hats off to that man for being so versatile with the same voice.
It's pretty incredible, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, to play an ensemble by yourself and have it come off as 5 distinct individuals, it's fantastic. Because I don't think we've ever had 5, this number of clones, which is a small number, but I mean 5 unique, distinct personalities in the same place at the same time, all the time.
No, that's right. And every scene is off one another.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So is he in a room just reading to himself, or is he just going schizophrenic? Like, I've seen footage of Justin Roiland of Rick and Morty fame, who does both Rick and Morty, who constantly act off one another in scenes, and it's like watching a madman work.
I've watched, I've seen Seth MacFarlane in interviews, dip in and out of different voices, and I think there's a difference when you're doing essentially a caricature versus somebody like, it's just lost it now. It's another actor who does multiple voices. Mm. You kind of wonder, going back to the D. Bradley Baker thing, where does he do all of Hunter's lines in the booth by himself with the director, and then does all of Wrecker's line? Like, does he do them separately, or does he float in and out of? Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. James McAvoy in Split.
Right.
James McAvoy's ability to dip in and out of those multiple personalities was just uncanny. But I have to imagine, like, that's a real measure of an actor's craft to be able to do that so convincingly. Like, it's got to be incredibly hard. So again,
definitely would have to be hard. But there's some, I guess, emotional beats that you wouldn't get if you weren't delivering the lines on top of one another. I mean, maybe that's all done in editing, but
this is where I think, like, I mean, I have such a limited understanding of, acting in the booth. But I mean, like, listening to some of these voice actors where sometimes you're lucky enough where you have a director, a casting director or a voice director who's giving you the emotional tone, who's telling you this is what I need in this line. And so you just, you put it out there the best you can and hope that in the editing process that, it fits with the response that you get. Because a lot of times, a lot of voice actors will tell you that they don't get to work. They all do their work separately. They never see each other. And then they record their lines, and then the show is cut together, and it works the way it does. So
right.
I wonder if that's the case with D. Bradley, if he's doing them individually.
One character at a time.
Yeah, with the director. I think for me, if it was me and I had to do 5 voices, I don't think I could get my head around flipping back and forth, because I'd be, who am I talking as now?
What amazes me is the distance between, like, so we had 4 years between season 6 and 7 of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And how effortlessly he just picked
right back up, to it.
And how subtly different Rex is from Echo, but he picked them right back up.
Yep, right back to where they were.
And like, that's incredible to me, how that these guys can find their voices sometimes years later.
Yeah, with these big breaks in between.
Right.
All right, where are we now? We're getting chain codes, and so we're bantering back and forth between Echo and Tech about, you want to come out here and do this? Mm-hmm. At the same time, we're trying to figure out how are we going to get them over to Hunter and Cut and the family. And there's no way that they basically talk about, if we have a blaster fight in here, the whole spaceport's going to get locked down and nothing's going to happen. So we've got to get them out. And so it falls to Omega. And I don't, she kind of takes it upon herself. And maybe this is her way of, like, after the Nexu thing where, she already feels, like you say, maybe derided or belittled or like, I just got disciplined for that and I'm not dealing with it very well, but this is my way to make up for it. Where she takes the chips and decides that she's going to get them there. And the thing that we tried to avoid happens anyway. We end up into a blaster fight.
Because
it wouldn't be
one and then all of them.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Star Wars without one. But then you've got the rest of the squad. So you've got Wrecker and Hunter in civilian dress, just kind of milling around the spaceport, but still monitoring with their comm. And Wrecker ends up, hopping over the fence, as it were, per se, and helping out. And they even make a point to say, like, there's some radio chatter where they actually mention a couple of civilians got through with guns. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah.
And they're like, if that doesn't really, tweak some interest, I don't know what will.
Wrecker does a twist on the classic take 2 bad guys' heads and crack them together, but it takes 3 of them.
I loved the sound effect that they used for that moment. It was the same sound effect as the energy balls that the Gungans were using.
Must be in this hand.
It was the same sound effect. Let's talk about sound effects for a minute, because back in, and I hate doing this, going back to episode 1, in the holding facility, that whole conversation between Omega and Crosshair, there's one argument to be made that she is force sensitive, and it's the musical cue that when she has that line, there's that same sound effect that's used. We've seen it used before when Luke uses the Force, when Yoda uses the Force, and it's almost like a wind chimey, and it's just a couple little notes that's just enough to suggest that, oh, is this something more than, her own intuition?
That's true. I did hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have said that before because that was a major point. Okay, so getting out of the spaceport, Omega gets out and hands off the chain codes, and she makes a point to say, "But there's an extra one," and Cut's like, "What? You didn't tell her?" And so he basically takes his bag off and sends them on their way up with the chain codes to get processed, and then takes a knee to say, "Listen, the fifth one is for you, and I want you to go with them because they can give you a life and that we can't." And she doesn't know how to handle it. She doesn't really say anything. She's just like, that like deer in a headlight look.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does. She goes off with them and gets in the line while they all make a break for the shuttle. We can't get the boot off the landing gear. And I thought that was hilarious because I'm literally looking at it. Remember in Solo when they had the Falcon booted?
Yeah.
But it was like a humongous anchor chain.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's no anchor chain here. It's just literally a boot.
When did that happen?
Yeah. We can't get the boot off electronically, but apparently Wrecker is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Like Wookiee strong, maybe?
Maybe stronger. He pushes 3 tanks off of a cliff.
Well, this is it, too. And I mean, you can argue that, well, they're on repulsor lift, and if they're not, under power being pushed forward, it's the same idea as you and I could take a block of carbonite, put it on a repulsor sled, and we could push it with a finger.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a little bit of that going on? But they show him to be straining against the 3 tanks to shove them over.
The droid says, let's fire the stabilizers in the opposite direction. And he bears down when the droid says that.
So apparently he's strong enough to rip a boot off a starship, which I thought, oh, that's cool. Don't piss him off.
No.
Yeah, and it's our it's our big moment where we're gonna escape, and so we're kind of there's a tension there because there's the fight in the spaceport, there's trying to get Cut and the family on board the shuttle, and there's a moment where they're stopped and it's like, hey, you look and you're thinking, oh, he's gonna be made, and by the way, why wasn't he made? He should have been made instantly. Like, the guy's got no facial hair whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was the sideburns.
He had a low hat on. I mean, he was about to be made certainly before that guy got called away.
Right.
It's hard to watch those clones for me be stormtroopers, and exactly what they were, hurting people.
Yeah.
Exactly the way we see them in Solo. More like a military with police power.
Yeah, I mean,
hurting people.
If you've ever traveled to
step this way, ma'am, make sure you sign up for your brand new chain code so that you can be part of the wonderful empire. And nothing like they're shoving. They shove the one guy to the ground. The walrus man,
the snaggletooth looking guy.
The snaggletooth guy, yes.
Yeah.
And they shove him to the ground. No, you can't. Go get your chain code.
And he's so desperate to get on board the ship. And he protested. He's already paid. He's paid to be on it. And they just don't accept that.
No, and it's certainly it's exposition. No interplanetary travel without a chain code. And it's how they're. This is their stroke of order. This is how they're maintaining order.
It's interesting as a former soldier who's been to a bunch of countries where the military and the police force are much more entwined. We don't have that here in Canada. The military is the military and the police are the police. And when you start blurring those lines, I mean, it can be an ugly thing, right? Where, guy in a blue uniform who's supposed to be able to, you teach your kids that they're safe people to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly your police force is no longer safe because they're they're this oppressive, Gestapo almost, right?
It's psychologically, it's a big impact. It's one of the problems I have with Canadian police forces moving from the short sleeve blue shirts to the full tactical gear when they're just walking around. Yep. It's scary. When I grew up, police were always just imposing figures.
They were persons of authority.
Right. But there was a certain height requirement. There was a certain sort of weight requirement.
Yeah.
And there was, and it wasn't the uniform that scared the crap out of you. And it wasn't even scared the crap out of you. It was this commanding sort of respect thing. It was a different animal. I don't want to get off. We're going way off the rails.
No, but we're not. It really does pertain to what we're talking about, because we're talking about taking a military and now having them be the police force as well.
Right. Yes.
And so the lines do get blurred. And so this is a huge issue, in North America, both in Canada and the United States, the militarization of police forces.
Right.
Why does a police sniper need to wear green combat fatigues?
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? It creates a very, very particular image, and the optics are what the optics are, and
that's
public
right.
perception is everything.
Yeah, that's right. And the masses of people are going to see that sort of thing, which is why you had after the protests last year this massive sort of demilitarization in certain sectors of the police, because they're starting to realize, why do you need an armored car? Why do you need a Ram that would take out Fort Knox when
we saw it in Solo too. I mean, look at the car chase scene and the speeder bike.
I love that scene.
Those guys, I mean, other than the black embellishments, which are ostensibly just paint applications, they were standard stormtrooper armor.
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
chips.
They exactly.
California Highway Patrol.
Yeah, they totally were.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it definitely is relevant to what we're talking about.
And you remember when you were a kid that on the back of I think it was the original Stormtrooper, but it could have been somewhere else on the toys or in the lore. But that Stormtroopers were the elite shock troopers of the Empire.
Yeah.
And so that despite the fact that that's all we had in the first trilogy, I mean, we had some variants and stuff. The idea that the Death Star Trooper, the guy in the black with the weird shaped sort of Darth Vader-esque helmet, they're the more numerous.
Yeah, they were like generic army guys.
Right, exactly. And that the Stormtroopers were this police force, that they were this elite, specialized group, despite there being like.
Does this not, does this not answer some of the questions that we've always had, the jokiness about Star Wars and sort of the efficacy of a stormtrooper? And we even talked about it today about, when we decided to phase out clones and go to conscripted soldiers, by now Obi-Wan is already in hiding. So he's not privy to the fact that the clones have been phased out. So, when he tells Luke Skywalker that only Imperial stormtroopers are this precise, is he still thinking that it's largely a clone force? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Probably.
That's right.
Maybe it's a little contrived to put it that way, but it's possible.
Well, no, I mean, it's valid. Certainly, the template that they're based off of, again, remember, like genetic memory, your ability to be good with a blaster is inherent.
Yeah.
And we're just going to completely. Did you guys catch the moment that Wrecker smacks his head on a door?
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, and so
I did when they're on their way to the port, and he's got the luggage slung up on his shoulder.
Yeah,
and he catches his head.
Just like the Stormtrooper in A New Hope.
He makes a point to say that these guys know, they know weapons or whatever it was. I assume it was a crate of something.
He said explosives.
Was it explosives?
Unlimited explosives.
Yeah, he cried. He's like, we both cried. Okay, so at this point, we're basically doing the Millennium Falcon's blasting its way out of Docking Bay 94. And it's kind of a similar bit where now all of the clones in the vicinity are now descending on the Havoc Marauder as they are trying to escape. And
they sort of wait a beat for Cut's shuttle to take off too.
Yeah, too. And that's the big thing too. It's like, we're going to stay here until they're safely away.
They're certainly drawing attention
with
they make a point of it by like having Cut almost be identified before the attention is completely drawn away.
Yeah, I mean, good timing, I guess, and just happenstance, or maybe the Force works in weird ways. But for them to get called away because a firefight is broken out at in the impound,
the very thing they were trying to avoid,
right? And now it's like, oh, here we are again. But they even say, like in the first episode, do you have a plan, or you just want us to do what we do? So here they are doing what they do, for good or for bad.
Yep.
And of course, it's like, where's Omega? And no sooner does Hunter, he's trying to explain that he's sent her off, and you hear that, wait for me. And there's the realization that, she's decided that, she's not going with Cut and Sue and the kids, that she's going to stay with them. And, Hunter has that moment where he's like, oh, and I don't know if this is, again, a patronage thing or a familial thing, or just that's one of my troops. And, no hesitation. He jumps off the boarding ramp and he runs out to recover her, to get her on board the ship.
No clone left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It was his decision to go back and get her in the first place and put everybody in this position. So
to go back to Camino to get her.
Even as a leader, he's just acting out of like we went through all this for this reason. So let's not blow it now. And he is the leader. So.
And so, that just further cements
control of the situation.
It further cements that relationship that maybe like between her and him, that they have something that is maybe just a little stronger than what she'll have with the rest of them. But I think that's certainly one aspect of the show that I'm going to enjoy, sort of the evolution of relationships between, her and the rest of the squad.
Right. And they describe his abilities and mutations.
Enhanced senses.
Right. So it might make sense that he's more emotionally sensitive and more
maybe
like,
going back to the Rambo thing. I mean, like, not making fun of Sly there, but if I can change, then you can change, and we can all change.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's in his whole career, he's delivered some heavy. There's some stuff in Rocky where he's delivering some heavy stuff, and it just sounds like if that had been
anybody else,
Shakespearean actor, that it would have gone down in the annals of being the greatest line,
lines in cinematic history.
Adrian, we did it.
Yeah. So really the episode kind of closes off with them making their way out of the spaceport. Cut and the kids they're off on the Resistance shuttle. And there's that moment where once we've broken orbit again, nobody giving chase. We break orbit and we don't know where they're going at this point. It's ostensibly away from here. Mm-hmm. Omega and Hunter share that scene in the lower bowels of the shuttle where he's kind of working away at that console, and she has her moment where, I know I messed up and I've got a lot to learn, but you don't need to get rid of me. And he has that understanding of like, well, maybe I've got a lot. And he doesn't say it, but I think it's kind of implied here that he also has a lot to learn, because he acquiesces and like, if this is where you want to be, then this is where you're going to be. And so they have that under.
Brand new to every single one of them. And, it's culture shock for her, but also this is that weird breathing point that we talked about in the Winter Soldier that these guys all have now suddenly. Ostensibly, their time is going to be occupied by being on the run or trying to find some sort of way to fit into the world now. And I think the way that they fit in might be just, noble gun for hire.
Yeah, like what was the old show? Paladin?
That's right.
Paladin was just a noble gun for hire.
That's right. Luke Cage.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. You can't help but draw the comparisons to the Mandalorian, and on some level, yeah, okay, formulaic. It worked for the Mandalorian, so I can see, from a company perspective, why wouldn't you lean into that to try and keep that momentum going? But at the same time,
and I have to hit again that these aren't new themes.
No, they are not.
Those relationships between Qui-Gon and Anakin, and we had those relationships explored between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and between Palpatine and Anakin, and maybe everybody in Anakin, but and between Obi-Wan and Luke, and certainly Vader and Luke, and so this theme of fatherhood or of parentage or of family or of responsibility is neck and neck with hope as a theme.
Yep.
And so I don't think that it's derivative at all. In fact, I think it's perfectly in line with everything I love about Star Wars.
Talking about relationships, I just want to go back and sort of just touch on Kanan Jarrus or Caleb Doom. And I couldn't help but think as I'm watching this, like how, I don't want to say impetuous because that's not the right word, but he's so energetic. I can't help but think of, how Obi-Wan was in episode 1 where he's cocky.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I see, Oh, apparently you guys are cut from the same cloth.
and he reminds me of Ezra in the first few episodes.
Yeah. Not like over, cocky. Not mouthy per se, but like
no, but just very like so sure of himself.
Yeah,
and with good reason. I mean, he whoops Crosshair's butt.
Absolutely,
cuts the end of his friggin' sniper rifle off. There's a feint there in that scene. I watched it a few times. He goes to go around the one side of the large tree.
Yeah.
So Crosshair swings his weapon that way.
Yeah.
And he just like does the force run the other direction and comes out from the other side of the tree so fast.
Yeah.
It cuts to the end of his, and then does that force assisted kick.
Yeah.
I did nice to see him.
I did like that they made a point to give us a very clear look at Caleb's lightsaber, and it is in fact the same blade that he wields as an adult, although not broken down into its component pieces.
There's another canonical error. Depo Balepa has a green lightsaber and everything else we've seen. So her lightsaber is blue in this.
Interesting. Was it like that? Because she does appear in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, it's green.
She's in the grandstand. Yeah. I'll have to go back and take a look at that too. Interesting. Any more any Easter eggs we want to talk about?
When they first approach the farm, it's nice to see those Stat battle androids pop up.
Oh, right.
Yep.
Roger.
The spaceport on the second episode, I noticed that the same model of droid that Jabba used in the basement of the palace was walking by pushing a crate.
Yeah, I lost count of all the background aliens.
that
are so familiar. There's a guy, a Bith guy, looked like he was begging for change or something.
There was a guy. There was a Bith got on the shuttle with the cut. He was the last one in line.
Yeah. And the guy that was your credits won't work here. He's the
Todarian.
Yeah.
And then on the ship at the end of episode 2, there, Wrecker's using the one droid.
The gonk droid, the power droid.
For power lifting there.
Doing some bicep curls.
That's right, he is curling it.
Anybody
they use the old school hack panels, the old school scomp panels.
Yeah.
Are in the at the spaceport.
They're everywhere now. They're more prolific in this, and maybe that's plot device because they, quite conveniently built a scomp link into Echo. So I mean, that's his shtick. I mean, if your thing is I can jack into a computer, then he's, plot wise, he's got to have the ability to do that.
Was it the second episode that the R2 droid tries to?
It is, yeah, with the alarm.
He smashes it.
Yeah,
which is a totally different. Because every time, I found that very interesting because we're always rooting for R2 units. So to watch an R2 unit get smashed in the head, and then and him go, I hit the spot. Then have it be noble. Okay, no, it is just a droid.
Well, I mean, clearly the droid was I don't want to say Republic, an Imperial droid now, who was, I mean, the klaxon alarm sound that came out of it can only be one thing, right? Mm-hmm. Over here.
Fantastic.
Tons of Aurebesh that we never got to, unfortunately. But like I say, if anybody out there did manage to translate it, we'd love to know
what might spend some more time
what it said. New episodes every Friday for the next 15 weeks, I guess.
That's what it's looking like.
Yeah. So
summer.
It is a summer. So we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get back to our regular publishing schedule so that this will come out sort of within a few days of maybe not same day, but within a couple days of the episode airing so that it's still relevant and fresh in your minds. And don't forget that Fandom Power is hoping to expand our presence on social media. So if you haven't followed us on Facebook at our Facebook page, please do so. And you can now join us at our brand new, shiny, fresh, still has the new car smell Facebook fan group. It's the Fandom Power Podcast fan group, and we're hoping that you guys will come along with us there and share your ideas and maybe chat with each other about what your favorite fandoms are and what you'd like to see us do in future episodes of the show.
Tons of stuff in the pipe. Tons of stuff in the pipe. I mean, we've got Loki coming up.
That's right.
The What If series coming up. There's so much stuff that could be explored here. Plus all the amazing random stuff. And guys, from as a sort of the guest guy here, just everybody check out Wes's other stuff that's going on. The barbershop stuff is fantastic. Check out Andy's stuff. We're one big family, and we're having so much fun, and it's all wicked content. So everybody check everybody's stuff out. All
right. Well, that's it for me, guys. I think I've talked my way into a circle on this one. I don't think I can say much more about it. The show itself, we're 2 episodes in. I think it's a strong start. a couple of hiccups, and I've made my concerns pretty clear, but I
feel like you feel better about it after our conversation, actually.
Always do.
Wicked.
I always do, because without that framework to bounce off of it, I'm kind of stuck in my own head, and sometimes that's not always a good place to be.
I agree with that, my friend. Yeah, me too.
That's probably just Filoni giving you that just enough familiarity just to make you at ease before he steps
and knowing that
on
it's
your
a
head.
longer burn than the rest of them.
Yeah,
that's why, you know what I mean. Like, no, because there's 8 episodes of 40 minutes or half hours of Mandalorian, and look at what we touched, and we're about to get 15 more half hours of Dave Filoni playing in the sandbox, and I'm like, wow, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, and I'm not I don't want the same rehashing of everything over and over again. So if we, as much as I love the familiarity, and as we've already talked about, sort of the legacy stuff within Star Wars, the cyclic, the reuse of lines and the nods, I'm great with that stuff. Hoping for some new, this is my, just on a side note, whenever we've played the Star Wars role-playing game, this is the period of history where I like to set my games. What in the opening crawl, the first lines of the opening crawl, it is a dark time. This is what, at least in Legends, was referred to as the dark times, and to me,
that's right. It's
the most compelling, most exciting, time to be in Star Wars, because the fledgling rebellion isn't this big, hasn't found its footing yet, and so now the oppression of the Empire is everywhere, and everybody's struggling with something.
This is what Disney has rebranded as the Rise of the Empire.
Rise of the Empire. So I'm gonna have to get my head around that.
It's Rise of the Empire right up until the Battle of Yavin, and then it becomes the Age of Rebellion.
Age of Rebellion. Okay, yeah. Rise of the Empire. So again, this is my
Rogue One fits into that. Solo fits into that.
Yeah.
And now Bad Batch is the third property to fit squarely into the Rise of the Empire.
It is my favorite piece of Star Wars history, because it's from a role-playing perspective, it's largely untapped, and you can do all kinds of things.
And it's the one we know the least about.
Well, yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been the first episode of the Fan Batch. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Our next one, hopefully we'll get back to our regular song stylings and be a little bit more on point with the beat by beat. Anything to close out on with, Andy?
Join us next time. Same batch time. Same batch channel.
Same batch time. Same batch channel. All right, guys. Until next time, be well, my friends.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to Fandom Power. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be talking about another one of your favorite fandoms. Fandom Power is a Sawcast production.
Have you ever wanted to start a podcast, but you didn't know where to begin? Maybe you'd like to try podcasting without having to invest in any recording equipment. Do you have an idea for a show, but you're not sure how to develop it? Let Sawcast Productions take care of all of that, so you can focus on what it is you want to say. Sawcast Productions offers podcasting solutions ranging from recording and basic editing to fully produced episodes complete with all the audio embellishments of a broadcast quality show. And when your show is ready, Sawcast Productions can distribute it too. Contact us online today. So, what do you want to say?